Okay, so I'm calling the meeting of the Ordinance Committee to order, it being Tuesday, September 11th at 6:35. And I would just like to have a moment of silence in memory of the victims of 9/11. Thank you all. I'll accept a motion to take up the minutes, but I'd like to leave them on the table.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
So can I have a motion to table? Just, I know we
Motion to
have
table?
them, but I think there's 3 sets to review.
Motion to table?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So the next item,
Take up item number 2. Is it a public hearing, Madam
it's a
Chair?
continue.
Continue the public hearing?
Yep, second, sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we have the public hearing open. It's a continuation from the last meeting on the special permit application from Westfield Bank for the installation of an automatic teller machine at 1650 Northampton Street. Now, at the last meeting, the main discussion took place around the possibility of moving the ATM further away from the residential home located next door to it was the main thrust, to my understanding. And I will say, because we are in a public hearing, that I've just had information shown to me, which I have not received on paper or hard copy, that legal, I guess, has obtained from the building department relative to whether this special permit should be sought under a special use or it should be sought under another portion of our ordinances. I'll ask our legal person to speak to that later on. But
If I might, Madam Chairman, my name's Jim Donahue. I represent Westfield Bank in connection with this matter.
Okay.
I do have some materials here that address the concerns that you spoke about earlier, which are the moving of the ATM, and the bank has spent some time and effort to locate a sound specialist to design a wall to avoid any unnecessary noise passing to the abutting neighbor's property. But with respect to the reason that we're here tonight, my understanding from the material we received from the building department initially on this matter, and in my review of the zoning ordinance that you have, this property at 1642, 1650 Northampton Street is in your highway district, and as such allows, as a matter of right, ATMs. So the only reason that we're here is that this particular parcel faces and opens, the doors open onto Northampton Street, that's the main entrance.
Okay.
And St. James is the abutting street, that's an intersecting street.
Okay.
So what happens under your zoning ordinance is ATMs are allowed as a matter of right as long as they're in the backyard or the rear yard of the parcel. Because this is a corner lot, the way the zoning ordinance is written, there are, in effect, 3 side yards on this property, the 2 actual side yards, and then the rear yard, because of the corner lot, is considered for zoning purposes as a side yard.
Right.
So were this not a corner lot, we would be here, we wouldn't be here. We would be with the building commissioner for a building permit to put a structure in the rear yard. So I believe we're under the proper section of the
Okay.
code.
Okay. This was just, I wanted to bring it up because it was just brought to my attention tonight, and prior to this, I was not aware of it, so.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what sections they're talking about, but that's why, what we've been analyzing and looking at this, that's why we were here and sent here in the first place for that issue.
Okay, thank you. So did you want to give us any other information relative to the moving of the,
If I might approach, we have
Sure.
a packet of material that the bank had prepared.
Thank you.
That addresses the issue of.
Thank you.
The moving of the, flipping the driver, and this one for the record.
thank you.
Drive-up teller's position with the proposed location of the ATM. And in there, it's addressed that in doing that, the sound specialist that the bank retained said that if you're going to put a sound absorbing or sound barrier wall up to keep the sound on the parcel and not bother the abutting neighbor, the better location for the ATM would be closer to the sound barrier wall, because that would move the noise to the wall and then have it bounce or travel along the sides of the wall in both directions and then flow back onto the bank property. The further away from the sound barrier wall that the ATM would be would lessen the value of the wall in preventing noise for the neighbor. So, for the bank's perspective, the proposal does not deal with moving of the ATM to the teller's position and moving the teller's position to the ATM location, because we think it's a better, and more in keeping with what the subcommittee had said they felt was the way to handle this going forward.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand. So this wall is new?
Yes.
Okay.
The proposal, if I might, just for the audience and for some of the members, you may recall we were here 2 months ago, give or take a few days.
Yes, last meeting was to.
And the reason that we were
Non-specific.
here was that the bank has determined, in their opinion, that for the safety of their personnel and the safety of their customers, it makes better sense for them to move the existing ATM, which is a walk-up ATM on the property, to the drive-up location. That does two things for safety. It avoids the need for patrons and customers to get out of their cars in order to use the ATM. And it allows the bank now, with the ATM that's in the bank itself removed, to expand the visibility of the outside from the inside of the bank. And as you may be aware, I think we mentioned it at the last hearing, over the last 4+ years, the bank has had an attempted robbery and 2 robberies take place. Luckily, no one was hurt. The neighborhood's been pretty well maintained. But the concern is still there for their customers and for their employees. So by being able to take this ATM out of the building where it stands, the bank's plan along with this is to put in a large window that would allow customers in the bank and the tellers and other bank personnel to see anyone if they were approaching and they looked that they were suspicious, they could make a call or to protect
Right,
everything.
I do recall.
The second thing would be that there would be no need for the customers to get out of their car, go to the ATM, and if someone's already there, stand in line. Or because of the way this ATM is designed, to get into the bank, you have to walk by someone standing at the ATM. So there's a little bit of a privacy issue, I think, that people get sometimes concerned about. But that's a basic reason for the creation of the drive-up ATM. And so the proposal that I submitted to you is done by Simtech. They're a sound barrier company, and their proposal is to remove the existing wooden stockade fence that exists on the property and replace it with a composite mixture of a fence that would contain materials that would act as a sound barrier for sounds coming from the bank property, hitting the barrier, and then would be deflected along the barrier and then dissipate without significant impact on the abutting property. In addition, the proposal extends the existing fence line by about 8 feet or so further along the abutting property owner's property line, increasing the amount of privacy that you would have with respect to anyone who's driving down the exit driveway from the bank out to St. James Street.
Because I'm not adept at reading these, can you tell me how tall the fence would be?
The proposal is that it's 8 feet. 8 feet, and it would be approximately 80 feet long.
80?
80. And the material that was presented there, I'm not a sound expert, but I did some quick research trying to figure out what I was talking about here. And this fence has a rating of 26, which in the material, that rating equates to a structure that would block 98% of direct sound coming from the site and hitting the wall. So this particular fence that's being constructed and proposed to be constructed would keep 98% of any sound that's generated from this ATM from leaving the bank's property. And because of the way the fence is going to be structured straight up, that when the sound, there's a cone of sound, I guess, a shadow of sound that they say they have, that would force any sound that does escape upward, away from the house, not to the abutting property. So the bank believes that this design addresses the concerns that they heard at the last meeting about maintaining a better degree of privacy for the abutting property owner with respect to noise, and with the extension of the fence, it would also help with some of the lighting from vehicles that will be driving down.
And can you just remind us again how long the current fence is? Is it 40 feet now, and it would be doubling the length?
How long is it?
Yeah.
We're looking to add, I think about 10 feet.
Oh, okay, so it's already 70 and you're going to 80 just to,
Yeah, the length of the fence is going to stay the same, and I think the height is about the same as well.
if people are speaking, you really need to come to the microphone and give your name and, so, but what we're understanding is that it would be 8 feet tall and it would be 80 feet long? Correct. Along, to create the buffer?
Yes, and there is a sketch.
Okay.
There's a flat plan in there that shows the stockade fence that would be removed and the new fence that would be constructed. And there's also some photos of what the whole fence would be.
Okay.
Second page, the plot plan there, it indicates that the stockade fence will be removed,
Yep.
and the extension, the photo that you're showing, the extension proposed of the.
All right, I know exactly where it is.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Dave O'Brien. My wife and I, Susan, live at 104 St. James Avenue, which is directly abuts the back of the property. With regard to the fence, the existing fence is actually 8 feet tall along the length of the canopy over the current drive-through. Then drops down to 6 feet tall, end of that. I guess a couple of things about this proposal. I haven't seen any of the detail. I have no idea what you guys are proposing or what it looks like, what it tastes like, what it feels like. Some concerns that I have is that, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert obviously in the zoning laws, but as I understand it, we're limited to a 6-foot high fence in Holyoke. requires a special permit to go over 6 foot. That's according to my conversation with the building supervisor. So, having said that, obviously, we want as much protection from noise and light and disturbance as we can possibly get, and I understand the higher the fence, the more protection. However, there comes a point in time where we are literally 5 or 6 feet from the traffic pattern. If you get a special permit to put an 8-foot fence in there, I might as well take the windows out of my house, because I couldn't see out the windows other than directly into that fence. So I guess I want my cake and eat it too, and that's to say, I don't want the noise, I don't want the light, I don't want the disturbance, I don't want the exhaust at 2 o'clock in the morning. But I also don't want a tall barrier that would prohibit me from actually looking out of my windows in the house. It's an unfortunate situation because it's so tight there.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to make sure I heard you. I thought I heard you say that the current fence is 8 feet tall?
There's a section of current fence that actually is 8 feet tall.
Okay.
It's a section that is as long as the canopy that sits over the current drive-throughs. That's another sort of objection I have, is that, okay, if we put in an 8-foot fence under a special permit, it still does not block the light coming out of the existing canopy. The bank changed to new LED lighting, and it's great if you're under it and you're conducting business, but if it's in your backyard, it's objectionable. It's very, very bright compared to what once was. So again, I guess I want my cake and eat it too.
So do you know what material the fence is made out of that's there now? Is it
It's-
wood?
I believe it's wood. I believe it's cedar. It's the typical stockade fence that you would buy at Home Depot or whatever.
Okay, so it sounds like it doesn't have any noise blocking
No, absolutely not.
features to it
Absolutely not.
compared to what we're talking about here.
That's correct. It absolutely does not.
Okay.
But I'd encourage the board, really, Juan has visited and knows the situation intimately, and I've showed him just how tight this is. I'd encourage the rest of the board members, if you get a chance, ride by and take a look at it. It's really absurd to have that kind of activity that close to the boundary, and especially in a 24-hour environment. The current daytime environment, 8 to 4 or whatever it is okay, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's gonna be awful. And oh, by the way, what's your fence gonna do for light and sound on the second floor? Susan's parents currently live on the second floor. They're 88 years old, and I hate to.
Okay, thank you. Are there any,
Hi, I'm Susan O'Brien. I just want to also ask you guys, because I'm a real rookie at this. We've been talking to the building department and we've been talking to the planning department, and both of these, the planning department said that he should have gotten a request about this permit. Never got it, never saw it, that it should have run through his department. He would have added and looked into the ATM scenario, and added, his piece to it. He never even saw it until we talked to him last Thursday.
if you can come on the mic and just say,
City, everything the city required us to file with. I met with the planning department just to discuss this initially, that I was filing for a special permit. What the town clerk or other officials do with respect to notifying the departments, it's not really something that the bank has any control over. We're sort of, once we file the application, we're sort of at the mercy of the departments, making sure that they notify the people. So we're sorry about that.
I understand that, and that's why I'm bringing it up. I don't know this either, and it's an education for me, but after talking to Jeff Burkott, he was surprised that it never went in front of him, that it never came out of city council and went up to the planning department.
so can you just tell us what you're
He's just showing me a picture of the bank.
Okay.
But anyway, so, it's not understanding this process and how it works. We're educating ourselves as to how this should have played out. And it doesn't appear, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it should have gone to the planning department. They should have had some input into it. They haven't, so.
So just to be clear, there's different processes depending upon the nature of the application. And in our last meeting, we had information come forth as to what the history of the property was and what the current status of the property is, and addressed the fact that it had the side yards versus the backyard and that aspect. Now, it's come to my attention tonight that in May, a memo was written in the building department, which communicates all the time with the planning department. And so at that point, when the applicant was speaking with those various staff people, if they needed to file an application separate from a special permit that would run through a different pathway, that's when that would have happened if it was required. In those initial meetings is where the planning folks have the opportunity to say to the applicant, you may think you're under here, but you're really under there. And so that's properly when that should have happened. I mean, in the course of tonight, we're in public hearing. Crystal can weigh in on this if she has a different opinion of it. But, we had the hearing, and I did lose a little bit of track of the date as to when we opened it. But certainly any communication a department felt that we should have had relative to that should have been put before us then. So I can only, from what information we have before us, understand that the applicant applied based on feedback from staff. So I don't know if a mistake was made or a communication didn't take place. I can't really speak to that, but we're in a public hearing, and so if there's pertinent information, we'll hear it. If legal tells us the ATM's not allowed in the zone, well, that would be information we'd need to know. But if it is, and we're just talking about where, then we're in the right venue from what I know.
As things came up, and we were talking to the planning department, things came up like this drive-through lane that they want to use hasn't been used in over 30 years. So it's not like it's an existing, it's a structure, but it hasn't been used in at least 20, 30 years. So it's not something that they just want to reactivate and get going again.
Right, right. And all drive-throughs would come through a special permit process.
Okay.
Whether they're old, new, or,
Okay.
as far as I know. So I'll give Crystal an opportunity to weigh in, as part of this public hearing.
Okay.
That if she has anything that might inform us further.
So it looks like I was not given the special permit application. So when I first heard of it, this was a non-conforming use special permit, which rightfully comes through city council. Didn't think anything of it. The determination there would be more or less detrimental to the surrounding area. Juan came to me in regards to some concerns from these homeowners, and looking into it further, the ATM that they want to put in, and finding out about this communication from the building department after speaking with planning to try and verify what's needed. It looks like in the communication from the building commissioner, and this was told to me that it was sent to city council, whether it's in Ryan's mailbox, whether it went to the president, that I don't know. All I know is I pulled this from the building records. It does notify the applicant that they need to get a special permit for the ATM. ATMs as an accessory structure are allowed in a BH zone, but you still need a special permit for the ATM. And as many of you know, we revamped the drive-through ordinance this past year, and that included ATMs. So you would need the special permit as required under 716 to get an ATM. This structure does not come under a non-conforming use or a non-conforming structure because it's basically lapsed as abandoned because it hasn't been used for the last 2 years. So all of that was delineated in a correspondence from the building commissioner, whether that was relayed to the applicant at the same time. The correspondence is directed to city council, like you had mentioned, May of 2018. So, I mean, that's the information I have. It looks like we're missing a special permit, which then would have gone through, because the drive-through then does have to go through review of planning board. That's where planning board was like, I don't know why I haven't seen this, but that's because the permit was not filed in such a way that it would be required to go through planning. So-
Okay, so on the application itself, it says that the applicant is applying for the installation of an automatic teller machine on an existing pad used previously for a drive-up teller, and that the infrastructure is there. So for our purposes, they are seeking the installation of an ATM with a special permit, which sounds proper. I don't see anything about those other things you've referenced on this application.
Can I ask what their filing was under? Do they give an ordinance section?
I mean, it doesn't look like they're saying anything about previous use or anything else in terms of seeking the ATM. They're simply describing the history and asking for an ATM. They're not saying anything about those things you're referencing. And that would seem to come to us under a special permit.
So this looks like May 16th, when it was given to the clerk, it was sent to planning board, health department, building department, fire, conservation.
So,
So I don't know where the breakdown was.
well, so from my point of view, I'm reading the application. It looks straightforward that they want an ATM. Our special permit says they should come here. That's what we're doing. I mean, do you see a problem with the process?
Yeah, the ATM would have to go through planning review, not just to city council, so I don't know why it didn't.
Okay, so then, from a process point of view, it would seem that we would have to keep the hearing open so that they would respond to that application.
Correct.
So we will keep the hearing open so that they can do what needs to be done. And when they do it, then we will continue. Well, I don't know if a special permit is required for the fence or not.
Yes, special permits required for a fence from 6 feet to 8 feet.
If I might, just to say planning review, what is it that this planning review is intended to encompass?
They need
Is
to
it like
make.
a site plan review?
I don't know if it requires a complete site plan review, but they would have to hold their own public hearing, or in conjunction with this one, but it sounds like even the planning department hasn't reviewed this. So they'd want to make sure that your setbacks are correct because they're treating this as a complete new install of an ATM. This wouldn't come under a pre-existing because it's been outdated.
We're here under a pre-existing non-conforming structure. The nonconformity is that the structure where this ATM is to be placed had been approved when it was appropriate under the existing zoning bylaws to hold 2 drive-up teller machines.
Correct.
And the one teller machine was removed, but all of the infrastructure, including the canopy, including the supports, including the electrical, was left in place. So the reason that we were told by the city that we needed to come before the City Council Ordinance Committee was that there was, since it was a pre-existing non-conforming structure, we needed to get a special permit to allow that structure to be constructed.
So the
In our
structure, you're
in my,
correct.
well, let me just finish though. In my discussions before we filed this, I went to planning and I spoke to some gentleman who was there, and said, this is what we intend to do. And he said, that's not our issue, you need to file with the city council. Now, we have done everything that the ordinance seems to tell us that we have to do for this particular use that we're asking for, and we've done everything that the city has indicated that they wanted us to do in connection with this. All the bank is asking for, we're not asking for any new infrastructure, we're not asking for any change in the location of any materials or physical structures that are there. We're just looking to have the council approve a special permit to install an ATM on an existing site, which is, for sake of simplicity, require 4 or 5 bolts to bolt this machine in and connect the electricity to it, and it's off and running. Now, the purpose that we're here for a pre-existing non-conforming structure is that the change that we're requesting is not significantly more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing use of the site. And I believe we've made that point. The only issue that we have is the abutting neighbors are concerned about the direct impact on their property, which we are trying to address in a fashion based on the information we received at the last meeting. And now tonight we're hearing a whole host of other reasons that we should be addressing coming from the neighbors. So we're sort of punching at a moving target here, and we can't get the answers that we want. We've tried to address everything that the subcommittee has asked for in a practical and workable way. This proposal will allow the abutters to have no lights, minimal sound coming from the site, even with respect to sound that now is not prevented under the existing materials that are there. So we're asking the Ordinance Committee to review this and to make a decision. Either it's much more detrimental to the neighborhood than the current use, or it's not. But whoever's giving the information to the council that this use needs to go before someone for a special permit, I would submit to you is incorrect. And I don't know who that is or where it's coming from, but the zoning district that this operation is in, that the bank is in, is a highway district which allows, as a matter of right, ATM machines. So
let me clarify for you. So when you went to planning, you said that you were replacing the guts of what was already there. So what this used to be was a drive-up, like you put in the box and it would shoot up over into the tubes. That's different than a drive-up ATM, which is 24 hours a day.
I didn't say that.
The prior non-conforming structure, correct, your prior non-conforming structure is what needs to look at the more or less detrimental, but a prior non-conforming use is separate, and this was not an ATM, and you are installing a new use at this location.
This is a permitted use in the zoning district.
Correct,
So
with
it's
a
not a
special permit
non-conforming
of the
use.
city council.
No, I understand this, but these are questions that we've been asking since we started this process from the city, and now at a public hearing, we're getting sandbagged basically by saying they're using the term pre-existing non-conforming use. That's not what this is. This is a permitted use. It is a non-conforming building. It has nothing to do with the use of it. Everything that we're doing here is permitted under your zoning bylaws at this site.
And I take your point, and I think the part that we have to sort out, okay, so assuming that the ATM requires a special permit, which you have applied for, which I do not have the application any longer, and that is to come before us for a special permit, which I think is correct. Right, Crystal?
Yes, you would need a special permit.
So this application for an ATM for a special permit is correct. Now, in terms of the proposed fence to try to reduce the noise, if there is an ordinance that pertains to that, it may require some other step in order to accomplish that.
And I appreciate that. What we're saying to you, and the abutter has indicated sort of trying to have it both ways. If we reduce the size of the height of the fence, which is what seems to be the abutter would like us to do, bank has no objection to doing that. We went with the 8-foot fence because part of the fence now is already 8 feet, and our sound expert said to address the concerns that you're telling us the city has and the neighbor has, the whole fence should be 8 feet so that you don't get the light and you don't get the sound. So
Right.
we've done that.
Right, and I take your point, and now we all understand what the potential complications of the 8-foot versus the 6-foot are. However, if there is a limitation to the 6 feet because of the ordinance, you still, if I'm looking at your proposal correctly, would have the sound reducing qualities of the construction.
Correct.
Of the fence.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
The height is, the height
So-
doesn't change the sound quality.
So the way that I'm hearing this information is it sounds like there might be the need for planning to look at setbacks relative to something. I don't know that for sure. But, Crystal, it does look to me like they're properly before us on the ATM, right? And then the question is that planning has to weigh in on it?
Correct.
Okay.
So it would have to come here either way.
So-
Planning needs to
So
look at
we
it
are
and discuss.
proper, but they may also have to do their steps to properly weigh in, is what I'm hearing. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter from the public? Okay.
We also add some comments, because, go ahead.
I have a copy of the letter to you guys from the building commissioner, if you'd like.
Okay, I would like it, yes.
Yeah. And in it, he states that if a structure has not been used for 2 years, I think that's what we're talking about, is that particular lane was abandoned
The-
beyond 2
Right.
years.
The other thing is, there was no electricity to that unit until February when they put it in. So it was totally abandoned. I just want to set the record straight, that there was
Right.
nothing in that unit, in that drive-through, nothing. It was
Right.
a skeleton.
Right.
Until February,
Right.
when they hired electricians to come in and jackhammer the concrete and put in electricity.
Right, and
That's when it became active.
Right, and just to be clear, we're looking at the issue of a structure, and we're separately looking at the issue of use under the zoning. So gets complicated, but we will happily take that correspondence. You can come in and give it to us if you like. Oh, thanks, Dave. Council Roman?
So, yes, Madam Chair, just based on all this information, I was just going to ask if, we could just make a recommendation to continue the public hearing to a date certain. I don't, there's a lot of questions for me that I'd like to see answered, unless we have notification otherwise.
Oh, no, this is on a different matter.
So I would just like to make a motion just to continue the public hearing to a date certain.
Yeah.
Just because there's a lot of information in the air. I don't feel comfortable voting on this, approving this, or going this through. I'm not trying to sandbag anybody. I think the law department was very clear, so thank you, Crystal. And I just think that there's a lot of unanswered questions, Madam Chair. I think that we would be doing our due diligence just to continue and get some feedback from planning, have the applicant back in. I don't think it harms us by waiting.
Well,
to get
there
answers.
definitely has been a communication gap, for which I apologize to the applicant, because this is what really frustrates people when we're always talking at city council about being so friendly to applicants, residents, and businesses. So this is the exact kind of thing that we need to seek to avoid. So in the interest of not holding up the process,
Excuse me?
as much as we normally wouldn't do this, I think we could continue this to the next meeting rather than the next month. Because, and by then we'll sort out what does or does not have to happen.
At this point, do you have any direction to my clients as to what it is that we're supposed to be trying to present to the council or to the planning department to move this process along?
From my perspective, you have presented to us, this committee, what we need relative to the ATM. The question that has been raised, and I think further discussion has to happen since the correspondence did go out to planning, and if they needed to do a hearing, they should properly have done notice and have opened the hearing and let you know when it was. So I think we just need to follow up on that path because it's become evident that it was sent to the various departments properly. And so I don't know if there was a disagreement within the department or not. I just can't speak to that.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is if it wasn't sent properly to the departments, that's an internal problem that the city has.
Well, but our attorney did put on the record today that it was sent to the departments. So the departments have it. So it's
So
whether
then-
they have done the procedure they need to do. We're doing what we need to do. You have provided us with what we need. We don't have control over the other aspects.
I guess the problem that I'm having is there was a letter introduced just now from the building commissioner to the abutter. I don't know what that letter says. I don't know when it was written. I don't know what it's about.
Sir, it was not to the abutter.
Where did it go?
It was not introduced to the abutter.
Well, I haven't seen that letter either. No one copied us on it as the applicant, that we would even know
because
that
it
this
was
is something to
addressed to council.
address.
It was addressed.
I mean, I don't know how we're supposed to hit a pinata
And
here.
I do hear your frustration, and I acknowledge your frustration. I share it, because this is the first time I've seen this letter also. So I hear you, and again, I'm sorry there is this trouble, but we do have to work it through. And the best thing we can do to keep it on a better time track, hopefully, is to continue it to the 25th, I believe, is our next meeting, rather than further out.
If I could put in a request for a copy of that letter?
You can, Crystal, you can provide us a copy, so I can give him this copy. If, I thought you gave it to us.
Get him a copy.
If you take anything in a public hearing, you can't give it back.
Well, it's,
Well, we didn't accept it. Well, we didn't accept it. You can give his copy back. What? Yeah, may I? Watch this. See how we just got it?
but can you just let the applicant read it? Can you let him read it?
Motion to continue the public hearing till the 25th.
Hang on a second. Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Wouldn't it be possible to move this forward to the city council without recommendation? Give the planning department, the building commission, legal department a week to get their act together on this and come at that point with it and just move the process forward rather than continue like this and make business people suffer for the disconnect that's going on here.
Well, I do take your point, and I do sympathize with the point. My concern is that if we don't follow the proper procedures, we may grant the special permit, and then the building department may not grant whatever the next thing they need is.
I understand.
So
I understand,
it's out
but it
of
could-
that concern.
It could still say tabled at the full council level, but we've heard plenty here at the committee level. Just move it forward. That's all I only see. Move it forward without recommendation.
Thank you for your input in that regard. What is the will of the committee? We can
Make a
do
motion to continue to the next ordinance committee meeting.
September
September
25th
25th.
at 6:30.
Yes, ma'am.
Any discussion, any comments?
I wouldn't mind making a quick comment, but you got a
Counsel-
motion on the table, so can I say something?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just to the Mr. and Mr. O'Brien and to the applicants, I really appreciate everything you did here. We've got two separate issues in the ordinance code, in the zoning code. One is where I think Attorney Dunny was probably more right than wrong, because this, under our, I'm going to get into the weeds here in a second, but under our appendix to ATMs, accessory uses and structures, I think that's where this properly belongs. I don't think this is, I really don't think our regulations require planning board review for this. I think that's for a special permit for drive-through special permit. I don't think this is applicable. I think this is a freestanding standalone ATM. So that's my opinion, but I think just to be an overabundance of caution, well, I heard what my friend said, I don't think we should make a vote on this tonight. I don't think we should move it to full city council. I really appreciate everybody's hard work in trying to, accommodate what the abutters had to say, all the hard work with the fence. I would just make sure that when you go back to the building commissioner tomorrow and/or the planning board, that we really zero in on what section of the ordinance is applicable, because that to me is a major flaw in this thing right now. We don't have, there's two separate sections of the ordinance book. Hold on, Mr. Donahue. There's two separate that apply to ATMs, and I really don't know which one holds at this point. In reading these two, whether it's Section 7 or there's Section 4, which you can easily look them up yourself. So I think you've got to really zero in and figure out which one applies. If it's the one with planning board, I'm sorry, you got to go through the process. But if it's not, then you can come back here in a couple weeks and we can have a vote. But I've got to encourage you, I said it before, and I'm going to say on the mic this time, I really wish you would have a conversation, not in this forum, with the abutter. I don't know why that's a hard thing to do. Now, hold on, Mr. So I really wish you would just figure it out with if the abutters are, if there's no way to satisfy them based upon that, then we'll take a vote in here. We're going to take a vote regardless, but I just truly wish you would consider that option. I don't think their requests are unreasonable, but if the answer is going to be no, you can't do it, then we're going to have a hard conversation in here, and the vote's going to shake out the way it shakes out. So I'll leave it there.
I appreciate everything you've said, and we'll see if it makes sense, but I think before I have a conversation with the abutter, I need to know what the city's position is. The building commissioner's letter there, which is dated May 22nd, vacillates between a pre-existing use and a pre-existing structure, and comes down on, one of the statements is that it's a pre-existing, that after 2 years of non-use, you lose the right to use that. Right. That's true if it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, which is not our situation. So I appreciate what you're saying. Unfortunately, I'm told that the vice president who's been moving this forward on behalf of the bank is not going to be available for the 25th to be here, but we can still go forward without that at this point in time. If that's the date you want to continue to, that's fine with us. We're not asking for a continuance or waiving any timelines that may exist.
So as the chair said, we're all frustrated here by this. I mean, clearly we're frustrated. So you've got so many cooks in the kitchen, and we really don't, but if we get a real clear opinion from planning, building, and legal as to where you can direct your efforts. I'm not sure why this wasn't situated early on when you filed it with the clerk's office, but it wasn't, so we just have to figure it out going forward.
Okay.
Well, yes, and I think, sometimes things get raised in a public hearing. My interpretation of the letter being sent out to all the departments and the departments not sending a letter of concern, consideration, or anything else, I would have interpreted that as we did, that they didn't have a jurisdiction, or they would have noticed it and opened up the hearings and, let us know that it had to be a joint hearing. But it could have just been some kind of a mistake or an oversight. So I think in 2 weeks, hopefully we just get the answer. Hopefully my interpretation is the one that it means. And so do we have a second on the motion to table? All in favor?
Aye.
So we are tabling this to September 25th at 6:30. Thank you.
Motion to take up item number 3.
I should say continuing the public hearing.
Yes, ma'am.
To say, date it properly.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
So I'll take a motion to continue the public hearing for item 3.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 3 is a special permit application from Holyoke Gardens LLC for a marijuana manufacturing establishment at 5 Appleton Street. Good evening. You're up.
Okay. I was out in the hall, so I didn't hear.
I just called, so
No, it's okay. I just was
So
getting my
you-
people to come take the empty seats that were now available. It was
So-
kind of packed, and when we first arrived, it couldn't
So
get any
you-
seats.
you are timely.
Excellent.
So at our last public hearing, we were unable to close because we had just received questions, and you had just answered those questions
Right.
on that day.
No, we had answered them 4 days earlier.
Okay, you had answered them that week.
Right.
And so we left it open so people had a chance to look them over before tonight. And then subsequent to that, I did receive, as did we all, the supplemental responses
Yes.
that you submitted
Right,
in response to that.
It was our understanding we had satisfied all the questions that were pending.
Okay. So, members of the public, if anyone is here to speak in favor or in opposition to this special permit, would you please come to the microphone, give us your name and address, and any comments that you may have?
Hi there, my name is Morris Partee, 127 St. Colby Drive. And as I mentioned briefly before, unlike many of the other applicants in this category before the city, this one is the true homegrown effort. And so it will benefit not only the eventual employees, but also other people who have invested in getting this operation off the ground.
Thank you. Not seeing any.
Thank you, Morris.
Other members of the public who wish to speak. Council Roman, did you wish to be recognized? Is there any member of the committee, and I didn't recognize that Councilor McGiverin and Councilor Sullivan are in the room for our meeting tonight. Are there any questions, comments? Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, where are you, Dave, in terms of permitting with the Commonwealth?
We submitted our application on May 16th, and apparently we're one of the first 10 non-priority applications that were received and duly accepted. Because of the fact that there are a lot of priority applications ahead of us, and about 20 new priority applications have sort of cut in front of us while we've been waiting, we're still around like 40th in the queue or something like that. We're hoping that we will get through this process and receive our provisional license within the next 60 days. According to their regulations, apparently about 30 days ago, we finally completed our application because they had sent us back a few things. But now, from 30 days ago, they say that they're going to get us our decision within 90 days of then. So hopefully we're going to get a provisional license within 60 days. At that point, we have to do our build out and get inspected to get our full license. But that's what we're waiting on now, is to get the provisional license so we can do the work to make it all ready so that we can get inspected and approved.
Okay, and you've been here,
Can I add to that briefly?
do what you gotta do, sure.
You have to be on the mic.
So one of the next steps in the state process is actually to contact City Hall. And so I'm not sure who at City Hall will be contacted. The state wants to check and see, is the host community agreement in place and is the zoning suitable for the purpose? And so I'm not sure if you all know who is going to be contacted at City Hall for that purpose. Is it the mayor's office? I don't know. But anyway, that's where the state is actually. The state will be asking the city of Holyoke, is the operation good to go?
Okay.
Councilor Bartley, you have the floor.
Right.
I appreciate Morris has been paying very close attention to this.
Yeah, thanks, Morris. You were, I think you've been at the other hearings where we imposed conditions to the special permit.
Yep.
Okay, so you,
I agreed to all the conditions that you had posed.
so we'll just be consistent.
Like I said, we have the former Holyoke Police Sergeant, Mr. Kevin here. He's going to be our head of security. Following in what you had wanted us to do that, we had already done it. We had hired a retired Holyoke police officer to be our head of security, and we will give preferential hiring to retired Holyoke police officers and retired police officers from other cities that now reside in Holyoke in all our security hiring decisions. We can't guarantee that that's all that there will be, but we will give those people preference absolutely, just like we did
Right.
Sergeant Kevin.
And then we also had a couple other ones. Remember about the owner would pay the commercial tax rate, and there'd be.
Oh, yes, we'll pay the commercial tax rate, absolutely.
30% of the employees will be Holyoke residents, correct?
At least, yes. The
Great,
beginning
yeah.
will be higher
Okay,
than
so
that.
we'll make a motion during the appropriate time to, oh, I'm sorry, did I?
No, you're
Okay.
fine. I thought you were done.
We're
Chris.
happy with those conditions, and those were part of our plan anyway.
Great, yeah, that's great. Dave, I mean, I've known Dave, Mr. Caputo, I mean, I think I don't know if you sound too familiar, but I've known him for a long time. Mr. Caputo, did you sign a host community agreement?
We've signed the host community agreement. We'll be paying 3% of our gross revenues to the city. If things work out the way that we're expecting that by the end of year 2, that will come to $1 million a year.
Okay, and we have that, Madam Chair, in our jacket, the host community agreement signed by?
The mayor did sign it, so we definitely
And
have
you-
that
you-
all. We had to actually have that in hand before we could even apply.
I just don't remember seeing it. It's been a while,
Yeah.
so
We absolutely took that care of that months ago.
I'm just going to take it on face value that it's in there without having the chair scramble through all.
And it's the standard host community agreement that all businesses in the marijuana sector in Holyoke are signing. They were going to do custom ones, and they decided, no, we're just going to do a boilerplate. This is the deal. It's 3%. Take it or leave it. We said, sounds good to us.
Okay, thank you.
All set. I also want to be sure that you have received the waterworks recommendation relative to the hydrants there.
We have, and if you can ask Councilor Sullivan, who's actually directly doing the work to install said hydrants, we have completed all the water department's requirements with regards to hydrants in our facility.
So
Is that true,
so you would not have a problem if, as part of the conditions, we reference the recommendations of the water company?
That is already in process to be completed.
Okay, so.
Won't make any difference to us at all because we're already
Right.
doing that one way or the other. Whether
All
you
right,
give us a
but just-
permit or not, it's being done.
Okay, but just to be thorough, it's a letter dated July 17th, and there's 7 items on it that I will be adding as conditions by reference to the letter,
That's fine. Like I said, we have hired
since he is aware of it.
We have
Otherwise, I
hired
would
Counselor
leave them
Sullivan's company to implement that for us, and he can speak to the actual achievements that have been done so far.
alone. Okay, as long as you're okay with these 7 items being added along with the other conditions.
That's no problem at all.
Okay, so,
All right, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of corrections there to Mr. Caputo's comments. I do not own a company in Holyoke. I am familiar with the company. It's a company I was formerly associated with. I know the young men who run it.
Okay.
They are doing.
My mistake, sorry. I assumed you ran it, but we never spoke about it directly.
Nope, I am collecting Social Security.
Okay. Okay,
Having said that, I am familiar with the group that is doing it. That work is proceeding. I have also interacted with the water department, and I am very familiar with what's going on down in that entire area. And they have directed the work they want done, and I know that it's proceeding on schedule. That much I can attest to.
okay, thank you very much. So I have a motion to close the hearing and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And
Well, I'll make a motion to grant it with the aforementioned conditions that we've had for the
Second.
prior applicants, as well as the conditions referenced by the chair lady tonight pursuant to the
Second.
Waterworks letter.
And of course, it's all pursuant to the granting by the state.
Yep.
If we don't get our state permit, we can't use your permit.
The Bartley subdivision.
I wish we could
conditions
just
of
get a
state,
permit from
federal,
you,
and
but-
local permits.
Yeah, we like that, but it just under discussion, it's only because, and Dave, we're all set, so you can,
So
Dave, we close the public hearing. So you can step back from the mic.
you
You're-
can
you're all-
relax.
you're-
There's
yeah,
no
you're
more
all-
testimony
yeah,
that
you're all-
can be
you're all done,
taken.
Dave. It's just one of the frustrations we've had, Madam Chair, over the course of time relative to the host community agreement. Why did Nelson and I and others do this and want to do this? Because the host community agreement is so vague. It says nothing. It says a good faith, like maybe down the road, cross our fingers. Now we put some teeth behind it relative to the security positions. I think that's really important. I think Mr. Thomas will be a fine addition. The non-security positions, which are 30% Holyokers, will have positions because we are the impacted community. And then, of course, I think the most important one of all, frankly, is the condition that'll be to pay the commercial tax rate. And again, I say this not just to the committee, I say it to everyone listening, that under 933 of our ordinances, it's 2 sentences, so it's not a heavy lift to read it. It gives this committee and this body really broad authority so long as the conditions are reasonably related in time, place, and manner. And commercial tax rate is reasonable relation to an impacted community. I know we had some kickback at a couple of meetings ago relative to that, but we stood strong in this body, and I'm really proud of that for everybody that was here. And now we have somebody like the particular applicant who's with us, really embracing it. And I think that says a lot about the applicant, and I appreciate that. But I think it says a lot about this body. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bartley. Councilor Roman.
Yes, I thank my colleague, and I thank my colleagues on this committee, and I thank you, Madam Chairwoman, exactly to echo the sentiments of Councilor Bartley, and that's why I look forward to the day where we take up in this committee, and I applaud Councilor Bartley for filing that and allowing me to co-sponsor where we get to see host community agreements. I think it's critical for this body, just because, it's, with all due respect to whatever administration's in the mayor's office, just because you think a host community agreement's the best for the city, the council should be able to ratify those or view those, because in some instances, yeah, boilerplate is great, but these provisions should have been in the boilerplate template, and I think they should be going forward, and that's all from you. So I thank you, Councilor Bartley, for really spearheading that, and I think that this body should look into that, because it's going to be critically important going forward. There's precedents for other communities doing that, and I thank Mr. Caputo for being so open and willing to allow those provisions, and for not saying he's giving me money personally this time. I think that was a great addition to this hearing. No, just a great addition to this hearing to not get that heat later. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion. Councilor Bartley.
But because it's still on point.
Okay.
So I won't go off point, but
We have to start setting a minute, mind you.
You're good. Because I was like a couple minutes late. I do apologize to the chair for being late, but I had to work. So, but I really want to thank our administrative assistant for the great job he did preparing the minutes, because the point just raised by the Ward 2 counselor, I'm so glad he wrote that in the minutes, because I stood behind him or stood next to him when he made his comments sitting here 2 meetings ago relative to that issue. I'll just leave it at that, about that. And so I'm glad that was clearly stated in the minutes, that I was right there with him, because I was at the meeting. we were there, and so it was important that was said there, and I'm glad you stood up to whatever was said at that point. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the special permit with the conditions as noted. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. This will be forwarded to the city council at the next meeting for their action. Thank you. You also.
A motion to take number 5 table, continue the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 4, zone change application of the Colvest Group LTD for 1575 Northampton Street. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Peter Lapointe. I'm a project manager for the Colvest Group. We have offices at 1259 East Columbus and Springfield. We are the designated developer for the former Lynch School property. We have been, for the last few weeks, have been attending a planning board meeting, soliciting their recommendation to this committee for a zone change. This evening, the planning board voted to recommend a zone change, and it's my understanding that the next step would be a vote by this committee making a recommendation to the full council for a zone change to Business Highway.
Okay, thank you. And I am in receipt of a recommendation from the planning board, which just was sent over tonight during our last public hearing. Our public hearing is open at this point. We kept it open because some people wanted to weigh in on the issue at hand. And so if there are members from the public here at this time that wish to speak in favor or in opposition to this zone change, that opportunity is available to the public. So if there are members of the public who wish to come forward in regards to this zone change application.
I'm a lot shorter.
Good thing it moves.
Good evening, Helene Florio, 31 Wellesley Road. And I'm here to strongly urge the support for this zone change through the Ordinance Committee. I've attended the meetings at the Planning Board. I'm very happy to have stayed and seen the results that have come through tonight. This is really something that is a very positive move for the future here in Holyoke. We can't say enough about the fact that it's a good group of people that have come forward with all of this. They've dotted their I's, crossed their T's, and jumped through all of the hoops and done everything so far that has been asked of them. And now, if this zone change goes through, they will then be in a position to be able to market that area. Just for some information for the public on this, there were a number of different RFPs that were put out for this piece of property. I believe that this was the fourth one that came through. There was a lot of different things that were suggested, and this one was determined by the group of people that had been put together by the city to review all of it. This was the one RFP that was considered for the best use for the property. They have come up with an offer to the city, and I believe that there is a purchase and sale agreement that the city council has already approved. They proposed the $250,000, which may seem like a small amount of money until you factor in the fact that the taxpayers in this community are not going to have to be paying for the demolition, the remediation, and all of the extra costs that are involved in the development of this piece of property. It is in an area that is all business highway. There are businesses from Hamden Street to Dwight Street on both sides of the street. And I've recently learned that prior to the school being there, the piece of property was taken in by eminent domain by the city for use for the school, but it was business property at that time. So it's back to being used for business highway. I've been getting to know the gentleman from the Colvest Group and support them, and I hope that you will do so too. So thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Sarah Crone. I live at 41 Pearl Street in Holyoke. and I to the public so that deals are made in the interest of the neighbors and buildings, including residents and businesses. I appreciate all the facts and knowledge that the Preserve Lynch School website conveys. For those of us who needed to learn more about the issues, they were there for us. It makes it an easy choice to agree that saving the Lynch School would be the best interest of the city economically and environmentally. I especially appreciate learning about why the business highway zoning is the wrong zone, or at least the wrong zone now. What I appreciated most, particularly on the page about zoning, were the statements about not wanting another eyesore for future generations, and the imagining of attracting the kind of retail that reflects a thriving community and is suitable first impression for new visitors coming off of I-91. In the future, I hope this group or others have time to respond to buildings in regard to the needs of the whole community and the climate crisis, our infrastructure, economy, and ability to provide efficient housing and workplaces for all have to be coordinated so that Holyoke becomes a city that is attractive to new residents and businesses that will help our community thrive for generations to come.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rich Alstrom, 215 Madison Avenue in Holyoke. But first, if I may, I'd like to address the subcommittee from the Historical Commission. We have a letter that we've submitted to the entire City Council. If I could read that first?
Sure.
And then would it be okay if I make some comments as a resident?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, great. So, members of the City Council, on behalf of the Holyoke Historical Commission, I urge you to consider the historical significance of the former John J. Lynch Middle School at 1575 Northampton Street and any redevelopment plans brought before you. The school is a fine example of mid-century modern architecture, is visible evidence of our past and part of the irreplaceable character of the city. Preservation and adaptive reuse of buildings like Lynch School are vital to our communities and are the most sustainable and solid form of economic development that a city can undertake. We request that the City Council consider only those proposals that preserve Lynch in any redevelopment plans. Sincerely, Richard Alstrom, Chairman of Holyoke Historical Commission. I think we'll submit the letter to the City Council.
We did receive it by email.
Okay, good. So I do live at 15 Madison Avenue here in Holyoke, and I do have concerns about the process of this zoning change. The project seems to be in front of a careful study of zoning change for this area. Back on April 30th, the Planning Department, Marcos Moreno's made a statement that the Planning Department is looking for a project. The careful rezoning of this area, I think, is really critical for the development and the sustaining market value of the homes on both sides of these communities. Right now, we do have issues with that whole area, that it is a dead zone. I don't think there's been any plan from Mass DOT in terms of how the development in this location would actually affect exit 17A, 17B. The question about connecting these two neighborhoods in a way that's viable in terms of pedestrian traffic, bringing the two communities together, I think is very important. The question of the Colvest Group being out in front of this change, I do have a question as to what the group is going to do with the Rite Aid Plaza. If they are looking for a project, Rite Aid Plaza is in need of redevelopment. I believe the Bank of America teller kiosk is only leased through 2023, and one of the other tenants is only 2020, something like that. It's not a long period of time. The area needs substantial development. If they're looking for a project, again, I would encourage Colvest to take a look at that particular location. But again, the proper study of how the zoning change in this area, I don't think has been done, and I would encourage the city council to not approve this zone change and kick it back to zoning. And there is a group that's been interested in preserving Lynch, and with the amount of interest and energy, I think there are people that would be willing to work on a project that does look at how to recreate zoning. So a good project, a project that would work to develop this whole area, includes looking at how Lynch could be reused, but more than that, a thorough study of any changes to planning that helps preserve the historic integrity of the building, and in turn, a more stable development of the area.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Michael Moriarty. I'm from 1 Lexington Avenue. I'm also the Executive Director of 1 Holyoke Community Development Corporation based at 70 Lyman Street in the Flats. I am here to speak in favor of the zoning change. I've been monitoring this property, been engaged with this property on some level for many, many years. I was the maker of the motion on the school committee to remove the property from school control because in 2009, somewhere between $10,000 to $20,000 a year of school money that needed to be in classrooms was going to lighting this empty building. I've watched repeatedly as various proposals have come forward, and the challenge is that the zoning remains at odds with the rest of the immediate area. Now look, I went to Lynch many years ago, early 70s, walked there from Dartmouth Street, and it was a business highway then, starting from Hampton Street and going really right on until you got to St. Jerome Cemetery. And the school happened to be there. I don't even understand how it is zoned residential right now. It's never been used for a residential purpose in any of our lifetimes. And to not give it the zoning that is consistent with the rest of this area is not only stymieing this block, but it's stymieing the entire area. The fact that we have found a willing and able and experienced developer that is ready to put their funds into the difficult and expensive demolition of this building rather than the city facing it. And as you know, as more and more years go by, buildings fail. I don't say that Lynch is at risk of that at this time, but 10 years have gone by that school has remained empty. How many more decades until we figure out that there's really not a lot of use for what remains there? It was built for a specific purpose. That purpose is no longer appropriate for that location. But I want to point out one other thing. I'm pretty sure as the fourth speaker, I'm the fourth speaker coming from the Highlands. I'm not that close to the property. I can walk to it. I personally harbor no fear whatsoever that my property values are going to be impacted by this, or that my health is going to be impacted by this, or anything else. But I work in the Flats every day, and I don't see very many voices coming out of the rest of this city to tell you the thing that I think you most need to be mindful of. This city is in terrible economic distress. We cannot afford the luxury of holding on to city properties that produce nothing for the city when they could be producing some tax revenue. My focus in public service has mostly been around education, and I know the city provides the minimum necessary and sometimes a slight bit more above our Chapter 70 money for our school department, not because it doesn't want to do more for the schools, but because it can't. I took a look at the differentiation between our community and neighboring communities and different cities across the Commonwealth in terms of the support they provide to their libraries. We are among the worst in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for supporting our library. This is a community that is very young. This is a community that needs strong library and school services so that that young population can thrive and move forward and support this city in the next generation. You can't do that with minimum contributions to your schools and underfunding your libraries. We have some of the worst reading outcomes in the state, And providing the resources to turn that around doesn't happen by stymieing business development. And there's plenty that I'm sure the police and the fire department could tell you about the shoestring budgets that they work on. The DPW could be doing a lot of things for this city. Maintaining unneeded buildings is not going to help us get there either. So there are myriad financial reasons to say, let this go. Recognize that it's part of a business highway and always has been, and give it the proper zoning, and let's allow the city to grow and move forward. I strongly believe that a well-designed and well-tenanted property handled by professional developers will stimulate more development in the immediate area. I equally believe the lack of stimulation that you've seen for the last decade there will continue if you continue to let a zoning anomaly hold back the financial value of this property to a potential developer and to the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm Meg McGrath-Smith. I live at 7 Wyckoff Avenue in Holyoke. So throughout the past few weeks as I've been attending the planning board meetings, I've been really struck by this narrative that I think has been created about the Lynch property that I think is largely based on false or incomplete information. And I don't fault the planning board or the Ordinance Committee or the City Council for that. The Congress has an entire research service that they have at their disposal. They don't read the bills that come in front of them. They have the research service that gets to give them a one-pager on it, right, with all of the best research put right there. I think we're kind of swimming in a lot of different stories about this property and a lot of different information. So a couple things have kind of struck me. So the first is that a lot of the folks who are pro the zone change keep citing that it's been 10 years. It has been 10 years. The Lynch property was shuttered the year the Great Recession began. So I feel like it's a little bit disingenuous to keep saying 10 years, right? Nothing was shifting. No one was building 10 years ago. We were in the worst economic crisis we'd been in since the Great Depression. So we've had 4 years as a country of steady growth, right? We're getting ourselves out of that recession. In that time, you've seen 3 proposals come forward. That doesn't tell me that we're desperate, right? So some people are saying, well, we've got to go with Colvest. We finally have a developer that wants to work with us. We've had a number of different proposals, right? People maybe really didn't want Frontier because they didn't want a CVS. They didn't want the charter school because they didn't see the tax value to that, or they didn't think the proposal was sound enough in terms of the money they were saying it would take to get the building back in working order for them to use as a charter school. And then the Colvest, kind of appeared. And people seem to be seeing this as like a saving grace. I think that there's this cynicism, right? Holyoke should take what it can get. And I really reject that level of cynicism. I didn't choose to move here 12 years ago because I thought Holyoke was desperate. I moved here because I loved its historic character. And our architecture as a city is certainly a part of that. The Colvest Group is the same developer who owns the Rite Aid Plaza, and in the past 2 years have done nothing to improve the property. I don't think anyone could claim that property adds to the historic character of our city, and it doesn't give me any desire to hand over the Lynch property to them for them to demolish it and build yet another tarmac and strip mall. For this reason, I'm entirely against a zone change that would allow this deal to go through and entirely against the deal itself. The argument for the sale seems twofold to me. The first is to increase taxes. The second is people saying it's been abandoned too long, it's an unusable building, and it's an eyesore. If you corner Marcos Marrero on this, he will tell you the building is sound, and it could be used almost immediately, be put into reuse for school warehousing or school department offices or as a school again. As for it currently being an eyesore, the landscaping needs to be kept up on. That was addressed by the City Council this past week. The extra desks and the lone biology class skeleton that's in the window could be removed, and you would never even know that the building is abandoned. The building looks and is largely fine. If the city wants to abate the rest of the asbestos tile that wasn't removed several years ago, it can certainly do that. When Colvest was looking for how much money it would cost to abate the asbestos, they got a quote from Associated Building Records that it would cost $900,000 for the full abatement. The reason why that is so high is because the vast majority of the asbestos in the building is as insulation in between the layers of brick, right? You have a layer of brick, you have a layer of asbestos, and you have a layer of brick. It's only expensive to abate the asbestos if you're trying to demolish the entire building. There's very little asbestos in the rest of the building. Most of the tile that was originally made of pressed asbestos, right, like most tile of that era, was abated years ago in most areas of the building. So, and the city has done nothing to try to look into what would it actually cost. But I assure you, it's way less than $900,000 because that's the cost of getting rid of the asbestos and the hazmat costs for demolishing the entire massive structure and trying to keep the asbestos out of the air, non-friable, while they're literally demolishing it with wrecking balls, right? Asbestos is only problematic when it's friable, when it's actually exposed in the air and breathed into lungs. If it is inside of layers of brick, it is not harmful. And in most of our homes, they are of the era where there is asbestos, and it is only problematic when it's friable. So if the city wants to remove, right, the asbestos that's in some of the places where there's tile that has not been abated, it could do that. The annual rent alone that we are paying for warehousing for the school department would pay for that abatement, I'm guessing, in like 4 to 5 years. It's not a lot of money, especially when you consider how the building could be reused. Lastly, Lynch was not closed because of asbestos. It was closed because of under-enrollment by Ward 6 and 7 families who were school choicing out to other districts. We could no longer justify having open all of our middle schools. Okay, I want to stop there and just address the taxes piece. So there's more than one way to increase the tax base, right? And sure, we could demolish this building, let it be business highway, build whatever's going to be there, gas station. I mean, you all know the projections as well as I do. Like 20 years, let's look at retail. The stuff that's going to exist is going to be the fast commercial convenience stuff. It's going to be convenience stores, smoke shops, banks. It's going to be gas stations. It's going to be stuff that's so cheap that Amazon, is not worth your effort, like a Dollar General, right? That's what's going to survive there, right? We could do that, but you could also improve the historic character of the city or maintain it and see property values go up. So the people who've largely amassed against this zone change and sale are new to Holyoke. We're new stakeholders into this community. We want to see the historic nature of our city preserved and our schools improved. My husband and I will send our children to E.N. White starting next year. Through neighborhood organizing, we've seen a return of Ward 7 families to E.N. White. 2 years ago, the closest family to attend E.N. White was 17 blocks away. As of last year, it was 2. So the point is, we don't want to see Lynch replaced by a characterless strip mall. We want to see the building open for reuse by the city in the short term. It could be used for school warehousing or by the school department. Maybe it can be a school again someday. I'm not yet ready to give up on Ward 6 and 7 having a middle school at some point. But if that's not a possibility, I'd like the city to maintain the character of the building by re-advertising the building for use as housing and not purely as a commercial development. I do not believe that Colvest's vision for this property matches my own for the city, and I ask you not to approve this zone change or greenlight the sale.
Thank you.
Good evening. I want to speak eventually, but we brought a real estate expert from outside, Craig De La Pena, to talk about new trend in repurposing building and developing new neighborhoods. So I think it would be a good time. He's not a resident of Holyoke, but we brought it as the people. Would it be okay that he speaks?
What is the will of the committee? But we just go one at a time, so if you're at the mic, you might as well.
No, because then I have data to substantiate what they both have said.
Okay.
So I think for logic,
Well,
2 minutes, you think, is a time limit?
Yes, please, new information if possible.
Did you see my letter I sent to you all today?
Yes.
My name is Craig Della Penna. I grew up in Holyoke. I'm a graduate of Lynch School. I lived most of my life in Holyoke. I currently live in Florence at 62 Chestnut Street in Florence. My wife's father was badge number 1 of Holyoke Police Department, if that counts for anything. I wrote a book about Holyoke. It's one of the top sellers in the whole series of books, Images of America. 6 print runs, still in print. There's hardly any dead people in my book. It's mostly the missing buildings here, the shocking, continuously demoing buildings in Holyoke. Holyoke, by some standards, looks like Dresden, 1946. And yet you continue to propose or have proposals come forward to demo more. The last master plan of Holyoke was done in the 20th century, I think 4 mayors ago. And then we had the 20th century, and here we are today on one of the most iconic anniversaries that has changed things in the United States, September 11th. And we've also seen a big change in Holyoke in the 21st century, which is the Holyoke Gas and Electric prevailing in the 80-year tension between Holyoke Water Power Company. Today, I'm a former organizer for groups, and I helped organize a group called Save Historic Holyoke. And we stopped the city back in the early 2000s from all the stupid demolitions. We fought it to a standstill by buying and preventing buildings from being torn down. But here I am tonight. Now I'll put my real estate hat on. I'm the first realtor in the United States specializing in the sale of houses near linear parks. And Holyoke's linear park is called the Canal Walk. I'm one of the founding members of that because people were starting to get killed in Holyoke because of demolitions that were out of control. The Bull's Head building, with the demo company coming in, and a mistake was made and someone died, and the guy who owned the body shop on Ray Street, he was seriously injured because this city could not move forward the Canal Walk. Today, I'm a realtor with the Murphy's Realtors.
Can you bring?
I'm going to bring it down.
Hone in.
Yes, I'm going to hone in.
Thank you.
As a realtor in the 21st century, there's something strange going on here. Since the Great Recession, places with cul-de-sac layouts, meandering streets, suburban districts are not seen with as much favor as years past. The biggest buying cohort in the United States today is the millennial generation. They don't want to live where they grew up. They want to live in a place with grid pattern streets, sidewalks, porches, with fun neighborhood stores and cafes nearby. The model build-out of the strip mall is a 20th century development. The developer proposing it doesn't even have a website. This is all about the 20th century versus the 21st century here. That school had never had a chance to be redeveloped in the last 10 years. Entering the recession, there was nobody interested in anything. Now people are interested, and they pull up this RFP, and what does it propose? Please come and tear it down and build your strip mall. So here's the developer. The real need, and which is happening in other places around us right now, is converting schools to residences. It's happening all around us. The city of Holyoke needs to redo
its master plan and scrap this plan to develop Lynch School, if you put out an RFP that called for residences here, you'd have some action. Matter of fact, the Mass Housing Partnership is knowing I'm here tonight talking about this. In the annual report this year, there's a big story all about a Holyoke project here that you probably all don't even know about. Be happy to send it to you. Please do not do this. It's so short-sighted. All your plans are directed towards 20th century development. We can't allow that. In fact, here's the telling thing, you don't even know this. The Pioneer Valley Railroad has opened up a construction waste and demolition debris facility after a lot of angst down in Main Street. Do you know why that's there? The largest growth thing for short line railroads is construction waste and demolition debris, because what we've been, as a nation, have been building the last 40 years for commercial development is stuff that's so flimsy that after 30 or 40 years it really needs to be torn down. It needs to be torn down. And all the landfills here are filling up. Where does this stuff go? It gets sorted out by railroads, and unitized trains go out to big holes in the ground in western PA and eastern Ohio that need to be filled. Former coal mines are now being populated with your old McDonald's, 90 banks, other wasteful commercial development. Don't do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Paola Ferrario. I live at 25 Morgan Street. And as you know, Planning Board spent 4 meetings deliberating on this. And that is because I think me and several other citizens spend all the time to do the due diligence that this administration had not done before they would take on this project. All the material that we presented is on a website that is public now, and I made the point, Ms. Bacon, to send it to you at the beginning of the hearing so that it could go into public record. I sent it right at the beginning of the meeting while the hearing was still open.
Oh, okay.
And so that things that I will be referring to and other citizens will be referring to can be added. So the first thing is, it is a very strange zone change because, and it's deceiving because yes, Lynch is by a highway, but truth is, west of it is a park, east of it is a neighborhood, south and north of it is a neighborhood. So it's right in a neighborhood. And if you look at Holyoke, if you walk north on Northampton Street and you go up to the development of the 40s and 50s, there's some incredible property with a highway right above, because that's just what happened. But thinking of Lynch and its position as like a little highway stop, like something you would find in Chicopee or in some deserted town, is just wrong. That is part of a neighborhood. BH is an incredibly unrestricted zone. And the only reason why the city would decide to go BH, Business Highway, BH, it's because, let's say they would change the zone, they could get a lot of money for that parcel. It's BH, you can do whatever you want, you can put a big business. But wait, no, we blew that one because we already have an offer for $250,000. So at this point, we don't know what's going to be there. But we sell this parcel that could be sold for a lot of money with a completely unrestricted zone. So best we can get is a little shopping mall with undefined little benign business. Worse, we could get a Hooter, Taco Bell, and an adult porn shop, because BH has that. And that is one of our gateway to the city. So the other thing that you want to think about it is, if you look, and I brought picture, I didn't bring picture of the full strip south of Lynch, but you all know it. There's Nick Nest, there's Randall Garage, it's vintage 1950. And the businesses on the other side, there's a little diner that's closed, there's a barber store that just suffered an accident, a nice house. That is unique. Most time you get off the highway and you find your generic pharmacy and fast food. We have a unique 1950 vintage strip right there. But what has happened, and again, I'll also reinforce the fact that saying that Lynch was on the market for 10 years is one of the great exaggerations of our time. And it was only publicized for commercial use. That was the only use that it was really publicized for. But what is happening in Holyoke, and I will submit this, I pulled up, just for the meeting with Planning Board and, let me find my data, for Planning Board and Ordinance Committee. This data, by the way, is 2 weeks old, but I wasn't going to do it all over again. The property sold in Holyoke, these are residential property sold in Holyoke in the past 6 months. It's 157 houses and sold for, I might have made some minor mistake, but ballpark $36 million in the last 6 months. Mostly in Ward 6 and 7. What is happening here, and I pull up the data on some of the houses. So, for instance, 84 Lexington Avenue was sold in 2002 for $180,000. It just sold in August for $423,000. This is my favorite, 1119 Northampton Street. Was first sold in '95 for $230,000. His final price was $869,000. 21 Morgan, the property next to mine, was sold in '95 for $86,000, then was sold for $40,000 in 2016 because a hoarder lived there. But it just sold in June for $200,000. And I can go on a lot of them, but the point is that the prices in Holyoke have tripled. And these are just the houses that are on the markets through the multiple listing service. There's cash deal going on all the time. And that, all these houses, these 157 houses for the past 6 months, they're all being reappraised. And they're bringing so much money in property taxes. Brings me to my point. In 1997, there was a city-wide plan made that wanted Northampton Street to be like a little strip with strip mall and all of that. But actually, the neighborhoods right around there reconfigure themselves to be the neighborhoods of this millennia. People move to Holyoke because they want to walk. So many people have said, I partially moved here because actually seeing Lynch gave me confidence to buy in Holyoke. And now there's going to be more gateway to the city, which is great. But there will always be a gateway to the city, both from Northampton Street and from the highway. And we really don't want to make a mistake with that. I also have, and this is just, we're trying to compile as much as possible, and if I can submit this, I call it the feel-good petition, but it's about 120 signatures from people, and I just say, you know, they're gonna destroy Lynch and build a strip mall. And the response is what? And this is, I made a point to get from all the wards. And what was really interesting to me is actually people from Ward 1 and 2 signed with less difficulty than people from other wards.
You want us to receive this
Yeah, sure.
officially? Okay.
And partially, it's because, I'm just checking because I know the things I do, and I have, yeah.
Okay.
It's a matter of pride. Lynch is really what people, they want the city to symbolize. And again, it needs to be advertised, and it needs to be advertised strongly. Colvest is a developer like many other, but you know, looking at the group, they're good business people, and they wouldn't come to Holyoke to do us a favor. They want to come here because they know that we've been discovered, that this is, in certain part, very prosperous city. The part that are not less prosperous they're great, and it's very dignified lower class people that work hard, that want a good future, that, you know, it might not be a rich city, but it's a good city, it's solid. And I think it's naive to think that Colvest is so nice and is coming here to do us a favor. You know, when you say, okay, we got, and I think there's a very good, I came out for a very good definition of Lynch School. Lynch School, among the city-owned buildings that are vacant, is the best maintained and the most dangerous to demolish. And so we're saying, oh, we're this poor city without money, we have to do something. What do? We take our best building and we sell it in their best location, and we sell it for $250,000. It doesn't make absolutely any sense. I don't know, are you going to talk about taxes? So I'm going to stop.
Thank you. I wanted to just ask you, relative to this petition, if you bring it to the city clerk, she'll certify the signatures, and then it will go to the full council.
Terrific.
That might be, you might want to
Absolutely.
go that route with it rather than leave it here?
Sure.
Okay?
Sure. Thank you.
And then it will come on.
Yes. And I also think, and I want to just have them for the record, and many people have talked about, I think before we take such a big step and give up one of our best assets for nothing, we really should see what Colvest does with the plaza. And I have a lot, but I just brought 4 pictures of the Colvest Plaza and the condition is in, just for you to have a record. And it doesn't look good. I understand that probably it'll be demolished, but it's 2/3 empty, and it's a real eyesore. So that's something to really consider before we just go ahead and go into business with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to read into the record the website that was sent to me and asked to put into the open hearing record. And it's https:/preservelynchschool.com. Yes.
My name is Diane Thurston. I lived at 158 Morgan Street. We moved here about 2 years ago. And one of the things that really attracted me to this community is the beautiful buildings, the historic nature of it, and most of all, the really wonderful neighborhoods. And I think that some of the unique buildings are one of the best things that Holyoke has to offer. So I would like to strongly urge you not to vote for a zoning change to put in a strip mall, especially at a time when that sort of retail establishment is doing so poorly all across the country, and the buildings that they own, the Rite Aid Plaza, which Colvest already owns, is half empty, and then now it's almost completely empty. I don't see a lot of potential in what is proposed to go in there. As someone who has been to door after door to talk about this, and I took a lot of the names on that list, numerous people are shocked and upset about this. I've run into almost no one who wants this school demolished. Most of the people that I spoke with are in the 7th district, because I find it very, very tiring to stand up for hours and walk that far, all at one time. I did get a number of people from other districts who also are concerned. I think that also it should be pointed out that the Lynch School was used, to my understanding, up until about a year ago for basketball games and other activities, and no one seems to think that it's just an impossible situation. It could be used for a lot of things that would be a lot more interesting. And I will say, coming into Holyoke, knowing nothing about the Lynch School, driving repeatedly down 141 past that school, I didn't know it was not in use for a long, long time. I've always found it to be very, very attractive, and a strip mall would have not made me real comfortable about that being made into part of our community. I think that we've talked with a lot of people who've moved here recently, because we walk a lot, and they all seem to be really interested in a walkable neighborhood and one that's not generic. The buildings that you have, the history of Holyoke is incredible, and I just hate to see something like this torn down for nothing.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arnold Jaffe. I also live at 158 Morgan Street. And I wanted to address the committee from two perspectives. One would be factual, and the other would be personal. I'm going to start with the factual. I sat through all of the planning board hearings and listened to all the justifications for the necessity for taking down the Lynch School and putting up a tax-paying site. So, I come from a kind of business background, 40 years in business, and I thought, let me look at the figures and see what I can find. Well, it's kind of an opaque process, how assessment is done and so forth. And so after speaking with the people in the assessor's office for a while, what I came down to was, let's see what comparable structures in a comparable tax base area in Holyoke are being assessed at and what kind of taxes they're paying. And then, just to use a simple and possibly mistaken formula, what I did was take the 18,000 square feet that the Colvest project has projected, plus the bank, and then compared it to the most recent structure that was put up, which is the Fairfield Inn and Suites. And what I looked at, the size, the complexity of the Fairfield Inn and Suites project would have made it, in fact, a higher assessed value than a series of stores, because motels or hotels are subjected to much higher standards. And what I came down to, after comparing comparable banks as well, was that the contribution would be about $80,000 per year. And let's say we'll just say I'm off by 100%. and it's let's say $150,000. Well, that's a lot of money for Joe Blow or John Smith to reach into their pocket and pay. We're talking about the total tax. Well, I decided to compare it to the total tax collected by the city of Holyoke toward its annual budget. The total tax collected is, I believe, $52.4 million. That's what the city of Holyoke's tax levy is. Of that, approximately $28 million is from residential and $24 million is from commercial, or for the split tax rate, the double tax rate. So if you take that it's actually $52.4 million. If you take the, let's say, $150,000 and divide it by the $52.4 million, what you have is approximately, if you figure per $1,000 of taxes paid, you've got a reduction of $3 per thousand. So let's say one of you pays $1,000 in taxes. Your tax bill, if the city doesn't use this tax money, this new money, towards something else, your tax bill would be $997. So this was my way of trying to figure out, after listening to a number of businessmen yelling about how the city of Holyoke has to prove itself that it's friendly to business by bringing in this project and reducing the taxes because they were all being killed by taxes. I wanted to see how much they were being killed by taxes and how this would help them. Well, this ain't going to help anybody, in fact. That's number one as far as fact. Number two, I had to listen to a statement that was read about how this building is a dump, it's an eyesore, it's loaded with asbestos, it's loaded with this, it's loaded with that, it's loaded with lead. Apparently nobody read the 2015 hazardous materials study that the city of Holyoke commissioned. Well, in fact, over about a 10-year period, under the supervision of the State Board of Education and other appropriate state departments, there was a tremendous amount of mitigation of asbestos in the building. The floors in the main corridors are all mitigated. The ceiling tiles are mitigated. Any of you can read it. It's right there in the city, in your the holyoke.gov. The issue of It's also on the website as well. The issue of the significance of the building, I mean, I had to listen to that too, about how the building was just an eyesore, it was a dump, it really has no significance. Well, the building is significant. The building has significance in this way. It was designed in 1944 by one of the leading architectural firms in the state. Now, it wasn't Frank Lloyd Wright, but Frank Lloyd Wright didn't live here. But this firm in Boston was chosen. They were one of the top firms in the state. The building was designed then. It was designed with the most advanced architectural principles that anybody had to offer at the time. It wasn't completed until '52 because after the war, there were no building materials available. So in fact, even though the building was completed in '52, it's an extant example of early American modernist architecture. There isn't anything else in the city that looks at all like it. There is no large-scale or public building that's like it. There is a church that was finished in the same era and has a few of the features. The American modernist features are inside the building extensively. You can find that on the website too. If you drive by the building at the right hour of day, you will see one of the incredible examples of design. I don't know if you know the building well. There are a bunch of columns in front. At the top of each column, barely visible from the street, are some domes. The domes were designed to be translucent so that when the light hit it at the right way, it would spotlight the front of the building. Why did they do that? To be an invitation to entrance to the building. All right. Let's move on to the Holyoke, the purpose of planning in Holyoke. The city of Holyoke went to a great deal of time and expense to produce two major planning documents. One is I believe it's either 1999 or 1997 city plan, the plan for the future. And the other was the urban redevelopment plan from a few years ago. These have a number of things in common, these plans. One of the things that stands out in both plans is the preservation of existing structures. The existing structures that would be targeted would be derelict buildings. There is no way, shape, or form that this building is derelict. Now, we had testimony at the planning board, a man who had worked as an inspector for the city for, I believe, 10 years, 2 years ago moved to Northampton in the same capacity, said he had been in and out of that building many times. He said there's nothing seriously wrong with that building. Throughout its history, the only thing that that building has really suffered from was lack of maintenance by the city because they didn't want to spend the money. But during the period when it was still occupied, they had no choice. The state was in there constantly examining and making sure that the building came up to code. The best use of, in planning, there's a principle called preserving the character of a community. Now, I've listened to this argument that, oh, look around, everything is, that whole little strip is just retail, it's commercial. Well, yeah, it is, but that little strip is a tiny segment of two large communities, which I guess you referred to here as Wards 6 and 7. Those communities are changing for the better very quickly. Now, with my partner, we have walked miles of those streets. I have found one person who was in favor of tearing the building down. He was an old codger who couldn't keep his head straight, and he said to me, and I quote, "They ain't found a use for it in 10 years, they might as well tear it down." That was his reasoning, and that's the reasoning that I'm hearing here. Nobody wants it. Really, nobody wants it. It doesn't, one of the other principles in your two major planning documents were to enhance the appearance of the gateways to the city. They explained to me, you think to yourselves, he explained to me how putting in a strip mall is going to enhance that gateway. I don't see it. Now I'm going to switch to a little bit of a personal point of view. We were, when we spoke at the planning board, a gentleman on the planning board interrupted my partner when she was talking about basically what she said tonight about how the Lynch School was an attractive thing and should be kept. And he said to her, in what I took to be a rather snide way, "Did the Lynch School cause you to come to Holyoke?" Well, she was a little flustered. And she answered, as you would when you're flustered. And we were talking about it. And my response now is, yeah, the Lynch School did, and I'll tell you why. We were staying with a friend on the other side of town, on Laurel Street. And when a realtor would tell us when we went to meet the realtor in the Highlands, we would get on Northampton because we didn't know Holyoke. That was the easiest way to get there. And we would drive down Northampton Street. And we'd go along and, oh, that's not bad. And we'd get to the Yankee Peddler and, it's okay. It looks a little run down. And then there were all these nice places. And then we ran into this strip. And the only thing that gave us any feeling of uplift, positive hope, was the Lynch School. We thought, now that's a nice structure. What is all the rest of this stuff here? Why did they let this come in? Why in any sense would you let that come in? And now I see why. For a quick buck, turn it over, and then move on. I don't know how much investment you folks do, or how closely you follow the investment pages in business. Strip malls are hot. You know why? Because you invest your money and it's basically a disposable investment. You don't plan on keeping the investment up for more than a handful of years. After that, you don't care, because you made your money back. That's what the bankers think. That's what the big-time investors think. Go online, take a look. Forbes magazine had an article about it. I mean, that's what you're talking about here. You're talking about just like the city or whatever entity it was threw away its art collection. You got a museum, you don't have any art in it. You've got a library, nice big new building, great old building with space to hang art. You haven't got any art in it. You go down the road, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, every time you throw away one thing that has any lasting value, so you can make a quick buck today, you've thrown away something you can't replace. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing anyone else. Councilor Roman?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman, and I thank everyone from the community for coming out, and I want to thank the investors for also wanting to be here in Holyoke. I think for me, and I like to quote my colleague, Councilor McGiverin, when he spotlights wisdom on me. So I think for me, I'm just looking from this perspective around the zone change, and that's what's before us. Like, how do we approve the zone change? I've learned through this process these last 2 to 4 years, and my frustration with the previous even applicant trying to propose something on that parcel or site, I don't have any control of what development goes on that site or property. What I have control of is the zone change. And so yes, you are absolutely right. Number one, Lynch is not, in my opinion, an eyesore. I think it's beautiful from the outside, from the exterior, driving by. I can only go off of the facts. And so I did hear some, quotes of facts and stuff like that. The Massachusetts School Advisory Board, and I happen to sit on the school board committee representing this body as their representative, just assessed Lynch last year and this year as we're looking to 2 new middle schools, and they deemed that Lynch was uninhabitable for a school. That's just a fact. You can look at the Massachusetts School Advisory Board online. They have that report. They presented that at Holyoke High School to the entire public. It got a 0 rating for it ever being able to be used as a school property, because they explored that with the whole trying to create 2 new middle schools back in the city of Holyoke. So that's just a fact, and I want to get that out for the public and for all of you here tonight. And so I was with you all, and hey, can we make it a school again? No. 2, when we took the tour, I think that was the most illuminating thing for me as a city councilor. Besides the discovery of all of those beautiful benches and trash receptacles and tree planters that I still, to this day, harp on, that we need to get out into our communities. Hearing, again, through the Massachusetts School Advisory Board, hearing the architect, taking a tour with my colleague, Councilor Sullivan, even just seeing, for me, was, right, layman. I'm a renter, I'm not a homeowner, I pay indirectly taxes through my landlord and through my car taxes and other taxes, but just seeing the whole boiler and heating unit and how that was all run down. So to say that this building is ready to go, when that architect, and we asked what would be the price tank for replacing this whole heating and piping system, upwards of over $1 million. That was the fact. That was from a third-party architect person who was going through the building with us, who was saying, hey, these boilers are shot, we can't use them anymore. And from the school committee side, we don't control school spending. So that $10,000 to $20,000 a year for keeping the lights on, we as a city council can't determine what the school committee or the school department does with light item control. So that's another fact I want to get that clear. So it's not like we, the city council, can say, school, you have to spend the money to keep and continue on with Lynch. And the other thing with regards to me, and this is just the truth, and I really applaud Mike Moriarty for being here tonight. As a council who represents the lower wards, we're all facing stuff here in the city of Holyoke. But no matter what, and I keep saying this, even with this industry that's coming in, this brand new shiny cannabis industry, we're treating like it's our golden star, you're gonna save the city. We as a body, I keep saying this, and that's why sometimes I do miss my colleague, Councilor Jourdain. We try to put forward a balanced budget amendment in this city, because we as a council are getting this budget unbalanced to the tune of 1.3 million, 2-point-something million, and then we have to cut, and we don't even cut to balance. And yes, I'm gonna get a call from Marcos and the finance team tomorrow saying, well, Nelson, we balanced that out with free cash. free cash is going down, cost of retirement is going up, so eventually the numbers aren't gonna match. No matter how much investment, and I thank the investors for coming in, I thank the cannabis for coming in. So 2 points that I heard this evening that for me are the most critical. Yes, from an environmental and asbestos perspective, I am extremely concerned and critical and will be very vigilant of Colvest to ensure that that's protected. 1. 2, we also need to stand up to this administration who's allowing a gas pipeline to come into Holyoke that a lot of people don't know about. And the reason for that increased gas is to help sustain our energy components for this cannabis industry, 1. And 2, when I was talking to that architect and just walking through with Councilor Sullivan, who's kind of like our guru in this council and body of Lynch, just looking at, yes, the parts of the buildings that were remediated by the state, yes, we got that factual information, but the fact that I couldn't even touch the curtains in the auditorium because they had asbestos on it, like we literally had to be careful what parts of the building we touched or didn't, or walk through and not walk through. It was a myriad of, yes, the state remediated certain parts, but there were other parts that needed extensive remediation. And again, the Massachusetts School Advisory Board has this listed. So it's to some degree, yes, there are parts of the buildings that probably could be saved. And there was a whole nother floor, I remember, because the building kind of went up and on an angle. It was like this weird component of Lynch where it went up and on an angle. They're like, this whole floor inside is just, it wasn't remediated, it hasn't been touched. And so this whole section would literally need to be removed. And that, again, that remediation cost would be huge. But I also want to talk about, because it's been brought up a lot of times, and I was the one as well, and I think others on this body, who were holding Colvest accountable for that current parcel. And the two things that we got when we asked them about their current parcel, and again, layman, just doing my homework, was that you had 2 lease tenants that were either going to move out or switch off, or including that ATM, and that it wasn't your plan to redevelop that parcel, but you were waiting for the current lease agreements to expire. And again, you could correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a public hearing, gentlemen. But I do remember we asking you about that, because the community, like myself, were concerned. And I remember hearing from you all saying, listen, we do have plans, but we have 2 tenants who are currently on the end of their lease term. We have to respect and wait for that, but we do have intentions to do that. And so I also don't want to disparage the investors too hard, because you have to look at the other parcels they own. I've seen what they've had in Springfield. I see what they've done in Northampton. They just bought a parcel out there. Looking at the different other parcels that they've done, and some of it have been offices. Some of it, yes, have been strip malls. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but I also don't want to disparage them completely to the point where they use this as the example. When we as a committee did do our diligence and asked them about that parcel on the public's behalf and say, hey, we're not pleased also with the condition, what's being done. And to me, the other thing around Lynch and the whole exterior and the story that you all told, and it still resonates with me today, and I'm a nerd. When I'm home alone, 1, 2 in the morning, I like to rewatch our committee meetings. I'll admit that out publicly. But when you told the story about how you bought a building from the diocese, and you try to keep the look and feel as similar as you could, and the diocese came to you and said, wow, this looks and feel like a piece of the church is still here with us. That story stuck with me, and I'm not sure if my colleagues remember that. But that goes back to that respect of the architecture and the style that was there. And so for me, again, I have debated and tossed and turned in my own head. I've heard from a lot of the individuals today who are for and against. When we add up the numbers, you're right, the tax revenue base is never going to be balancing out with this development or the next 50 developments that we have in this city, because we have a budget problem. We have a budget problem in this city, and the budget isn't balanced, and it's never going to be balanced. And I don't care, again, I'm a layman. I go back to my community who has not seen any investment in infrastructure and stuff like that, and yet we are saying, listen, this isn't the saving grace, but if this is going to inch us forward towards closing that gap, I'm not going to say no to it, and I, as a city councilor, do want to hold them accountable to say, hey, when it comes to the environmental concerns and impacts, I think that that's important for the community to ask. I think that with regards to what kind of investment, I mean, the RFP even included a provision, you could have put a pharmacy in there, which again, I'm recalling you all said we won't do that. We will respect what the will of the community is. And so for me, Madam Chair, and I respect Paula and my friend Glenn Sullivan, who gave me a call, and others who called and reached out directly. I've tossed and turned on this as well. I think that by allowing the planning board to have its time for due diligence, I've watched, again, listened, observed, and hearing all your concerns today, I think we would be remiss, and again, I only go back to my time here on the council. When we had that whole fight previously for the zone change for the previous developer, I was totally against it and voted against it. I was one of the people who shot it down. 150% shot it down. I've learned I will admit when I'm wrong. I learned from my colleague, Councilor McGiverin, who said, Nelson, we can't control the type of investment that goes on there. We can control the zoning. And if this administration in the city wants to put out, because even if we do this, the next RFP can go out again tomorrow. If we deny it, shoot it in the foot, they could put out another RFP that's the same zoning, that's the same interest of the city for developing that parcel, and in line with the master plan, because I've spoken to Marcos as well. And for me, I have to think of those communities. In South Holyoke, average income $14,300. And granted, this cannabis industry isn't going to be our saving grace for jobs, even though I thank my colleague for fighting for that percentage mark. This possibly could be jobs in our community that we're adding. And again, I don't want anyone to disparage if it's low-wage jobs, minimum wage jobs. Guess what? When you're in South Holyoke and the underemployed or the $14,300 mark, those are critical. Those are really critical. And so I'm going to be hopefully supporting and putting a motion through that we approve the zone change tonight. I want to make that clear for those reasons, and to say to the community, thank you. I do share those concerns. However, for those reasons that I mentioned above, I know and I've heard, and I would like for the gentleman to publicly state again tonight, if I'm remiss, that you all have intentions to rehab your other parcel or lot and or, put it out there, because I remember that conversation. We had that conversation. Number two, I'm with you on those environmental concerns, but from what I viewed, and again, yes, we don't have research teams, we don't have staff, our offices are literally these desks when we come in on Tuesday. We have a little meeting room in the back, but I get 98% of my calls at home, on the job, in the street. They show up at my job. And the cool new thing for me, similar to my colleague Mike Moriarty, I've now gotten in this development game and this looking at properties, looking at parcels, looking at trying to save the integrity of these properties that, yes, are going up in flame, a lot of them for slumlords, a lot of them for lack of care. And so we do want to salvage a lot of these properties. And I heard the gentleman who said, hey, you're just knocking down buildings left and right in Holyoke. A lot of it was for lack of care. A lot of it was for lack of care. And yes, I do have to take into consideration that Lynch now, a good portion of the school and property, have been out of use for 10 years. However, the biggest deciding factor for me was that Massachusetts School Advisory Board meeting and taking that walkthrough with the architecture, my Counselor Sullivan, who really explained, hey, this is that is that. And for me, I think that I'm also thinking of the cost to the city of Holyoke to either rehab, renovate, demolish, or even now we have this CPA funding in the air. If that's going to suck up all of the CPA money and remove it from possibly redeveloping or rehabbing or saving buildings in South Holyoke, the flats, or downtown that need salvaging as well, I think that if we have an investor who's willing to take all that cost, really be respectful of the environmental concerns, the development concerns of the parcel, to much of the guffaw of the gallery, I'm going to be supporting the zone change tonight, and I just wanted to put that on the record publicly so people know where I stand. And I always say this every time it comes to a contentious issue in this body. We, the public, you, me, we might not be on the same side of every issue. And for this one, yes, I'm voting in favor of the zone change, but there are many other important environmental issues and preservation issues in the city that I hope to see you all at as well, including this gas pipeline that's potentially coming down, and some of these properties, again, South Holyoke, the flats, and downtown, that could use some preservation money, that could use some of the CPA funds, that could use some of you all coming out to say, let's preserve those as well. So I just wanted to get that on the record, Madam Chair, and share my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank Councilor Roman, Mike Moriarty, and you too, Mr. Jaffe. You're all much more articulate than me. I'm just going to try and hit on a couple of key points. You've really done a good job of summing things up from both sides of the floor here. But let me hit a couple of key things here. Around the asbestos issue, it is still loaded. There was some remediation done. The $900,000 cost is in the private sector. That goes out. If that was still a city property, it goes out to public bid. Let's say you cut that price in half. All right, $450. Do it on the public dime. You're talking $1.2 million, because it's all going to go for prevailing wage. That's one of the big problems in Holyoke. Now we've advanced through the city council up to the state level. All right, for home rule petition to exempt us from prevailing wage on smaller projects. If you want to help tackle this problem, if there's people here in the public that want to help tackle the problems that are much bigger than Lynch School, get on Aaron Vega's butt. It's sitting dead in Boston in committee right now. That's one of the big problems with doing any kind of development on anything the city owns. Prevailing wage. And other cities and towns were at that meeting. I went to Boston. We testified in front of their committee. Other cities and towns, Chatham, I can't remember the other ones, I think Boxborough, there was 5 other towns also that are in the same bucket as us. Lawrence, same problem with trying to do development. You take, and I'm glad we've got groups that are interested in saving a property. Redirect that interest, please. New shareholders in the city, take a good look at some of the other stuff we've got around. Take a look at our historic inventory. Mater Dolorosa Church, Victory Theater, Scott's Tower, and H.H. Richardson train station. Beautiful structures that are still viable, an integral part of the core of the city that, now throw Lynch on. Which one of these do you want to lose? Which one do you want to tear down? It's also a budgetary concern. We need to throw our hearts and interest at these as well. You want to go after some others? Something built in the 50s? We got a ski lodge owned by the Holyoke Boys Club. Go up there and take a look at that. The Boys Club could sure use some help with that. Hartwool, dead in the water right now. You want to do condos? American Thread is for sale. Conklin Office Furniture just put it on the market. I don't know what that building is, 1 million square feet right in the Canal District. Beautiful site for condos. Go for it. Look out that window right there, above on the facades right here on High Street, and see the trees growing out of the stonework. Walk down the rest of the High Street, see all the other available opportunities. Walk down Main Street, see the facades with nothing behind them but collapsed buildings. All right? There's plenty of opportunities, more opportunities than we could possibly have the money and the time to throw at it. Get involved with the CPA committee. The CPA needs people involved in projects to bring the projects to the CPA committee. The CPA committee cannot allocate funds to whatever they feel. Somebody has to come forward with the projects. So if we've got the people, the wherewithal, and the heart to do it, let's get out there, get involved with some of these here, and take them on. We do need the tax base. We've got all these other buildings also. Scott's Tower is never going to produce tax revenue. H.H. Richardson train station, Victory Theater, and they need help. They need help. Let's channel some efforts and get out there for these. Laredo House, downtown. The beautiful, incredible structures. That's all I've got. And I'm going to be voting for the zone change.
Thank you. I'm sorry? Yes. Briefly, if you've already spoken, yes, you can.
So just to go on the record, nobody here wants Lynch to be a school anymore or think it could be. What the public is asking is that it's given a fair chance to be remarketed to a developer that will do apartments or something more creative with it, and because of environmental issue, to keep the structure. The second thing, I call you Nelson Norman, but Mr. Roma here, it's formal. You know, and we're both Latin, so I love the story of the church too, but then I went online, and the Church of St. Anne, after it came down, the ground were found contaminated. So it was teared down, and there wasn't due diligence, so it was contaminated, found contaminated after, and it was the Catholic Church that had to pay for the removal of those ground. And it's in West Springfield, and now there's a mall, and it's partially empty. So that's the sad side of the story. And it's all, you can find the article. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
I guess I didn't make clear, I'm Diane Thurston, 158 Morgan Street. I guess I didn't make it clear how it's not just the historical buildings that are here, it's the ones that have been preserved And many of those are in Ward 1 and 2 downtown, and that was one of the reasons that I moved here, because I looked at those and I said, this is a city that's taking an opportunity to take advantage of the beauty and the interesting things it has here, and that's why I want to be part of it. My intention when I moved here was to be involved in that. And I consider myself a part of this community, this city, not just Ward 7, where I happen to live. I have every intention when I came here of participating in a positive effort to use some of these beautiful buildings. What I have experienced in this and the responses that I've had have made me second think moving to the place that I love and have never been happier anywhere else. I will say that Mater Dolorosa was something that many people I knew were involved with, that was going to be a community place for music and for all kinds of things. I saw what happened there. I see what's happening here. And I will tell you that I will be involved in community organizations. I just got a flyer when we were walking at the library from someone who's in a community organization there. However, I don't know if this is the way Holyoke functions. If this is what they want, I don't see how I can possibly go around telling people you should move here, it's great. Because yes, there are a lot of places that need help, but what you're telling me is that we have to sacrifice our community for a few tax dollars. I want to be part of the whole community. I don't want it to be a divisive thing. And I'm not seeing a real, what I consider a fair hearing here. It seems to me like people keep getting involved here, and the government is not doing anything to support them. I'm just very disappointed.
Thank you. So I just want to read into the record, because while we were in another public hearing, a communication was sent over to this committee from the planning board, which had closed its public hearing regarding this zone change matter. And so I want to read into the record what they sent over. Dated tonight, regarding recommendation R-1A to BH 1575 Northampton Street. Dear Councilor Vacan, please be advised that at its September 11th, 2018 meeting, the Holyoke Planning Board discussed the above referenced zone change request. After consideration of all information and testimony presented during the public hearings, the board voted 4-1 to recommend to the Ordinance Committee of the City Council that the zone change request be adopted. Further written recommendation and dissent forthcoming. If you have any question regarding this decision, please feel free to contact me, signed by Christian LaChapelle, the chair of the planning board. So, since our public hearing's open, it was proper to read that into it. Councilor Bartley?
I'm glad you read that into the record. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, I think we should also recognize, I know I received 10 or 20 letters attached to an email today from Ryan as well. So I just want to recognize that. And we'll copy those and put those in the record as well. And I think I received another email from Mr. Jeffrey. I think I did. Okay, so so I reviewed that email, and half of the letters that were attached to the one from Ryan. So I wanted to recognize that. I also I'm glad you read that letter. To me, it's a little frustrating when we don't have a department head in here relative to this matter. So we don't have a mayor in here, we don't have a planning director here to answer questions, especially with the feedback that we just received from the public. It's a little frustrating to me. It's also frustrating that I see further recommendations and dissent coming. I'm grateful that the proponent is obviously OPED is the proponent of this. I know that. And so the Office of Planning made sure that a letter was printed out in a timely fashion, knowing that we were having our hearing now, and to get a letter of recommendation to us, knowing we'd have the hearing. But I don't think I can vote on this, or take a vote on this tonight, Madam Chair. Now, I made my feelings, partially known. I haven't expressed them completely, that I would tend more to support this than oppose this. But I think, in terms of my perspective now, I cannot take a vote on this matter without the planning board's, it's got to be more than, further news coming down the road, Madam Chair. That's weak. That's weak. And I know why they did it. And I know why they did it, because the mayor supports this. So don't fool yourselves. The mayor supports this, and you know it. And Office of Planning and Economic Development supports this, so you know it. So this, and then, I got to separate it's hard to separate my politician hat from my government hat, but we are elected officials, and I am a politician. I'm proud to say it. But let's not pretend who's behind this, okay, dear public. So I want you to be aware of that. So while I would tend to support this petition, I feel like this applicant is a high-quality applicant. I think they've done good projects. The presentations I sat in, I've been more than impressed with them. But I'm unimpressed by that letter. And consequently, Madam Chair, the only thing I could do tonight was to table this. That would be my vote. That's just, I'll make my motion after everybody speaks. If I get a second, fine. If I don't, fine. But Madam Chair, thank you. I'm going to, when everybody's done speaking, I will make a motion to table it so that so I can receive, and I know we could take it afterwards after the tabling, so don't explain the rules to me. I understand that. We can still accept the city letter, but I want to read that in open public hearing so that the letter is addressed in open public hearing, so that people who can see the letter, and I'd be remiss. Yeah. One more thing.
No,
I have the floor, Madam Chair. I just want to make. I'd be remiss Mr. Del Penna. I am a little embarrassed. I didn't know who you were, so I do apologize for that. But I've read your book, and I do appreciate all you've done for Holyoke. So I'm a little embarrassed for not recognizing you. So that's that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Sullivan.
Question for the chair. Once again, they did vote. The planning board did vote on it tonight.
Correct.
And the vote was 4-1.
Correct.
In favor of the zone change.
Correct.
Regardless of the weak letter. They voted 4-1 in favor of this change.
That is correct.
Okay.
And
I just wanted to make sure we were all.
No, that is correct, as I read it.
Yeah.
And it does also include that further written recommendation and dissent forthcoming. Councilor McGiverin.
Thank you, Councilor Bacon, and members of the committee and the public. I'd just like to share a few things and talk about not just what we heard this evening, but what we've been talking about for more than 9 years, what we've been talking about as a city for the past 20-something years and before that. We have a lot at stake here, and I hope the speakers this evening who shared their passion and their thoughts about architecture, historical buildings, and the preservation of the lifestyle that we have here in Holyoke understand that we are not using closed ears to their comments, even though we may not support what they're asking us to do. And I say so not lightly, but because there's a lot of history here that we can bank, and there's a lot of knowledge here that we can bank our decision on, and I think it's sitting right in front of us. That master plan that was referred to is 20-something years old, but that master plan was designed to get us into the millennium, to get us into the new century. And it was designed recognizing who we were, where we came from, but more important, where we are going. The architecture and the history of the city is cited in that plan. The people of the city across the board are cited in that plan. And it recognizes Holyoke as it was built, an urban center dependent upon business, but some of the most wonderful and beautiful residential neighborhoods within the Pioneer Valley. We have it all. We have our own water supply. We own our gas and electric municipality. We have canals that no one else has. We're on the river, and we have a lot going for us. But to support that, we cannot do it as a bedroom community. We have to recognize ourselves as an urban center, and we have to make tough decisions because the city, when it wasn't designed, to separate business from residential neighborhoods. It was actually designed to keep residential neighborhoods within our commercial districts. And that's mostly about what we're talking about here in our lower wards and what the center of the city is about. What changed the city was in the 60s when the interstate thruway came through. That changed the makeup of Holyoke, good and bad. It brought them all, good and bad, we can say that. It brought a lot of things to us that we didn't react to as a city quick enough. And when you look at the microscope of what Route 5 was before 91 came in, that's what those businesses were about. People traveling north and south, people traveling that needed some place for gas, needed some place to stay for the night, needed some place to eat, needed some place to maybe take a break and shop, get their kids out of the car. The barbershop that was referred to, that was unfortunately hit by a car and the owner, the proprietor of the barbershop's car pushed into it, is an historical building itself. That's the original Nick's Nest hot dog stand. That's how it all started, with people traveling north and south before Interstate 91. Nick's Nest, as we know it now, is a beautiful business, a Holyoke business. The Peter Pan bus station is gone, but we do have a car dealership. We have a nice little cottage that sells souvenirs, and we have a lot of things that are going for us that are unique to the city of Holyoke. The master plan points that out, what 91 is in the upper part of the city of Holyoke. Be careful not to hurt and harm residential neighborhoods, but take advantage of the on and off ramps, economic development. They're designed to have economic development, to have people get off, to spend some money, to use the commercial parts of a city, to be able to take their break off the highway and take advantage of things. And that's what we have to offer here. We have a long history of talking about Lynch School. This argument is not new. When the school committee, took it offline, there was a point where some school committee people wanted to put it back online, and the majority said no. We had other people that were looking at the property, and the majority of us said no. We finally had the mayor go for a request for proposal, and we met with Colvest because we had to approve what the mayor accepted. It's one of the finest developers I've ever seen walk into this chamber. I trust them, I understand, I believe in what they're doing. A bank isn't coming to be a residential bank. A bank that comes to Holyoke these days wants to be part of our future. They want the commercial loans. They want to be able to be part of the fabric of loaning money to people who are going to invest money in the city. That's how we grow as a city. We grow because people want to invest. We need commercial lending institutions to be part of that. Is Lynch School, could it be developed? I personally don't think so. I took the tour with everybody else. It served a great purpose. It was a fine junior high school. It served a wonderful purpose. The asbestos is hidden. It's not mitigated. It's mitigated because it's got false ceilings. There's still asbestos in the black mold we saw on the southern side of the building facing the fire station. Scared the heck out of me. If there was someone to come forward besides the gentleman from California that wants to make it a marijuana mall, the largest marijuana mall in the country, I'd listen, but there hasn't been. The Essex Hotel wasn't mothballed, wasn't saved, fell into High Street. 25 years ago, we took and looked at all the buildings that the city had acquired because the taxes weren't paid when our industry went south, when our 60,000 population dwindled finally down to what we think is going to be our new population of 40,000. We had the National Guard, we had people come in, we examined roofs, we examined structures, and we mothballed a lot of buildings with their help. One of those buildings was on the corner of Franklin and Maple Street, the building that fell into Maple Street 25 years later because nobody invested in it. We have to make tough decisions. Do we have to save historical buildings? Absolutely, whenever we can. But the city doesn't have the dollar, nor should the taxpayers be putting the investment in it. We need the private dollars to be putting the investment into whatever property we have. We have a good developer in front of us. It's consistent with the plan that we've talked about for this area, We know the pluses and the minuses, and I think it's time that we go forward and look at this as land use, not just one developer, but what we want to see happen in this area. And we need the tax base to grow. We need the new jobs.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to be heard at this time? Counselor Bartley, you have the floor.
Well, I'm just going to make a motion to table.
To continue.
Sorry,
right?
strike that. Thank you for the correction, Madam Chair. Motion to continue to a date certain. I'm flexible on the date. I know in 2 weeks we have a lot of traffic issues before us. So I don't think this next hearing will be a long one, Madam Chair, so I'd like to continue to our next meeting, 2 weeks. That's my motion.
All right, I will second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No. No.
The motion fails.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Under discussion?
Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, I really hear you, counselors, on that. I think that if you, especially for, counselors that haven't been here that long, I think if we get a chance to, I think it's only reasonable that we have a chance to read in public hearing the letter from the planning board. I think. I mean, this is almost, it has happened before when the administration from the executive wants something, and they will get it right from planning on the night we meet, because they know when we meet, and they'll get us a quick letter just to say, it's happened before, once. But a lot of times they'll just make us wait, and wait, and wait, because they want to slow play for whatever reason. Tonight, they're not doing the same thing. I think that planning board closed tonight. There may have been some people that were up at planning that didn't have a chance to come here, or they may not really realize our processes. I mean, if Marcos wants to run a letter through the printer and get it ready on letterhead and have it signed by the chairman, he can do that because they really want it to move forward. So they can make a special effort to do that. I think that's a sign of playing favorites. Again, I like Colvest. I think they're a fine developer, but I think the process could use some improvement. It's a very political process here. I think we should table this for two weeks.
Counselor Roman?
Yes, and I hear and I respect my colleague on that. The only reason why I'm against tabling or waiting is because it's not going to change the outcome of the planning board. I think, again, simply to echo my colleague, Counselor Sullivan's statements, it's going to still stay 4-1. And I respect everyone here. I respect the public. We, before even this meeting on the zone change, had Colvest before us in a few meetings and a few public hearings on a separate matter to accept them as the developer. And so we've had ample opportunities for the public to come and say, hey, we don't want this developer, one. And two, and just in my opinion, again, and I respect my colleague, I hear what he's saying, I just have to echo the sentiments of Counselor Sullivan. The ruling's still going to be 4-1. We might get one dissenting opinion from the planning board, but the vote is the vote, and they voted to close. So I don't think it's going to change the outcome. I respect my colleague. And again, I have to say, we're put in a tough position as a committee because we're missing a member, and I'm not sure how they would vote up or down or sideways, so I think this would have been moot. And so maybe that's what we need to break, because the chairs could do that. We approve that vote, so maybe it just needs one more person to break the vote so we could table or move forward. But I just think that, I just want to see this move forward. I think we've heard all the information. I echo the sentiments of Councilor McGiverin. I think we've heard ample amount as to why the zone change should go through. We've heard from planning, I think. But I agree and I respect what Councilor Bartley's saying, and that he wants to see the specific details of what planning said and so on and so forth. So again, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm still on the inclination, Councilor and colleague, that I would like to see it move forward, but I respect we'll see.
Thank you. Just to note, the planning board to this committee is advisory, And I feel if they have sent us a recommendation, and it will not change the vote. However, I think to do our due diligence, we are well advised to hear the opinion as to why they voted in favor, and to also hear the dissent as to why it was not unanimous. We are in an open hearing process so that we hear from the bodies that are advisory to us. They have chosen to hold their hearings separately. That puts us in the position of needing to hear their reasoning separately. And so since they have given us this brief communication, which states within it that they wish to give us more information, I think calls for us to continue to hear it and not to be taking the step to educate my colleague on the committee, who I know fully well knows the rules. I do think we would be within our bounds to, on the one hand, close the public hearing, because it would still allow us to receive the communication from the planning board, because it is advisory. And I do agree with my colleagues that I believe that we will not hear new information. We will hear opinions relative to the information that is known. So from my point of view, I would say we would be proper to close the public hearing, and we would also be proper to wait until our next meeting to receive the remainder of the communication and to make our recommendation at a subsequent meeting.
Fair compliment. Councilor Sullivan had something for me.
Councilor Sullivan?
I'm not as versed at all of the procedure, but I think we get another bite at this apple at a full city council meeting. If they've got something else, they voted 4-1 and then they sent a weak letter, but they voted 4-1. To me, that's enough. That's a super majority. Let's get on with it.
Councilor Roman.
Through the chair, if I may ask the investors, would waiting 2 weeks be acceptable to you, gentlemen? I'm just asking in the public, is 2 weeks good? That's not going to set you all back. Not to say that we're going to vote for or against, but we're not going to set you back if we wait 2 weeks to just, again, do our due diligence here and respect my colleagues' wishes to just get that planning board. 2 weeks isn't going to kill the project. Am I correct? Can you please speak on the mic, please? Do you mind? I'm just trying to honor my colleague's request. I think it's a fair request, but I'm just asking you, it's not going to kill the project, correct?
I don't think it will.
Okay, thank you.
But please, it's not 2 weeks. This would go before the city council next week. It's 2 weeks for this next meeting and then to the next city council meeting after that. You're talking a month, not 2 weeks.
Which is it's the following week right after that. So I make a motion to close the public hearing first, Madam Chair, just the public hearing.
Well, did Mr. Calcino want to?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just one thing, I wanted to just check the timelines. When we negotiated the purchase and sale agreement with the city, we had certain time requirements to achieve certain milestones. And as far as I'm concerned, it's okay. But I just don't recall what our agreement says. If the city will work with us in the event there's time restraints in the agreement, then I'm okay with it.
We don't have it. So we have a motion to close public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to table to the next ordinance committee meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So the public hearing has been closed. We will deliberate on a recommendation after we hear from the planning board per this communication and send our recommendation to the city council after that meeting. Thank you all.
Let's see, motion to, very briefly, could take number 5 off the table, open up the public hearing, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 5, that the city council create a temporary sign ordinance that regulates when such temporary signs can be placed in homeowners' yards and on commercial buildings or otherwise in public view. So this is a public hearing, and I do not have wait a minute, yes I do.
Should have it, yeah.
There is a recommendation. That came over from planning. Here we are. In this regard. So as the maker of this order.
Yeah, you can read it.
Okay, so.
It's public record.
Dated September 5th, regarding zone change signs, temporary sign duration. Dear Councilor Bacon, please be advised that the Holyoke Planning Board at their August 28th meeting discussed the above referenced zoning text change request to the zoning ordinance. After considering testimony provided throughout the public hearings, the board voted unanimously to recommend to the Ordinance Committee of the City Council the attached amendments to section 6.4.3.7 not be adopted. The board bases this recommendation upon analysis of the draft text change, guidance from the city solicitor's office regarding constitutional limitations on the city's power to regulate signs, which makes it impermissible for our ordinances to treat electoral or political signs differently from other signs. Councilor Bartley's explanation of what the ordinance change was intended to accomplish, and on robust response from the public at our hearing on the proposal. We are sympathetic to Councilor Bartley's concerns and grateful to him for bringing the issue forward. This recommendation reflects our conclusion that the proposed draft would not fully address that set of concerns, but would place an unreasonable extra burden on citizens seeking to make unobjectionable use of temporary signs and upon the city agencies that would be charged with enforcement of the new ordinance. That conclusion was reinforced by the strong reaction of the members of the public present for our hearing. Every speaker expressed concern about the additional administrative burdens that the proposal would create and questioned the need for an ordinance to deal with the issue. It seems clear that there is no public appetite for a legislative solution to this problem, or at least no public appetite for a solution that is not more narrowly tailored than Supreme Court precedent allows the city to craft. Again, we appreciate Councilor Bartley's leadership on the issue, and in recommending against the adoption of this change to the zoning ordinance, we do not intend to imply otherwise. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Christian LaChapelle, Chairman. Are there any members of the public here to speak for or against the temporary sign ordinance?
Meg McGrath Smith, 7 Wyckoff Ave. I said this at the last meeting where Senator Bartley presented this to the planning board. Oh God, I'm just gonna hold this. I understand the wanting to have the city look neat. I totally understand appearances, and I understand how irritating it is for someone to have their political signs up for months and months and months, or just effectively then become permanent signs. But the problem is that I don't think you can craft the ordinance that you wish you could craft, because you cannot, because of the Supreme Court case, craft an ordinance that says, look, you have to take down your political signs when it's been way too long and they're tattered and they shouldn't be up there permanently. This sort of ordinance would make it so that anyone who wanted to have their sign up longer than 2 weeks during that time period had to go to the city hall to get a permit, which one, I think creates an undue burden on city hall, but also that includes things like sales signs. Nothing can be removed from this. A temporary sign is a temporary sign, and you cannot, by the Supreme Court case, actually identify a group of that sign and say, that's the sign we mean. This groups into every sign. Black Lives Matter, welcome your neighbor, pride, choose an issue, right? I can imagine this getting really nasty and people being very pissed off at the city if you make them go down to the city hall for every single one of the signs they want to put in their front yard, including sales signs. So I don't think the city should go forward with this in any way. Thank you.
Thanks. What is the Council Bartley?
Yeah. Right, so right, I appreciate the letter from Chairman LaChapelle, and so I'm going to read it. Crystal, is it okay if I read our email correspondence? I think it's okay, right? Yeah. So I'm going to read So you may or may not be a lawyer. You didn't identify yourself as such. I am a lawyer. Miss Barnes, she works in the law department. She is a lawyer. Mr. Marrero is not a lawyer. So there's that. I said to her September 7th, after I got the letter, at Tuesday's meeting, please be prepared to respond to and elaborate on, quote, the guidance, unquote, provided from your office as referenced in this letter. I mean, I'll take the letter, just to remind you. This is dated September 5th and written by the chairman, Mr. LaChapelle, and wherein he says, the board bases this recommendation upon analysis of the draft text exchange guidance from the city solicitor's office regarding constitutional limitations. Now, I didn't write that. That's from him. Guidance from the city solicitor's office, which we call the law department now. So I asked our law department, you know, what guidance did you give? Or did I miss something? This is, dear Councilor Bartley, my recollection is the same. This is from Crystal Barnes. I was present and spoke at one of the hearings, not the one where there was, quote, robust response from the public, unquote, and we all know why that was there, but that's okay. And I informed them, meaning the chair, that while this does affect political signs, it also affects other temporary signs across the city. Plus, there is an outlet for everyone to utilize their right of freedoms of speech in placing temporary signs, but it also minimizes city liability for any damage done during the winter months of their property due to snow plows, weather elements, etc. I also informed the planning board that as written, the ordinance we currently have is unconstitutional and needs to be amended. At the very least, I was hoping for constructive criticism to amend the language and provide recommendations rather than a unanimous denial. So the current language, now this is from a lawyer in our law department, says the current language of the ordinance is unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. Now the public, and I really respect the public that spoke tonight. The same person spoke, I think it was August 28th. I can't remember my dates. Maybe it was August 14th. I don't remember now. Was it? Well, it was in August. And at that point, the law department was not present. And I just want the committee to know there have been seven public hearings on this. I was at 3 of them. Not at one time when I was present, and the last time I was on my feet for 45 minutes with questions, not one time did we talk, other than Mr. Marrero, not a lawyer, by the way, and certainly not a constitutional lawyer, but not one member from the committee, of which there is at least one lawyer on that committee, who did not speak against this, did not raise this issue. In fact, was supportive of it during the public hearing. So what flipped? Madam Chair, I don't know what flipped, but what I'd like to do is hopefully we can close this public hearing tonight. We can get some feedback from the law department as to an ordinance. Now, and Crystal worked on this extensively, the ordinance change. Now, if we think as a body that it doesn't make sense, fine. But at least let's get some language, the language in front of us that we worked on, and let's try to make what we have, according to lawyers in the law department, try to do our best to make our temporary sign ordinance comply with constitutional precedent.
So, Crystal, hang on. Crystal? So, in our previous, are you all right? So, in our previous hearing sessions, we talked about the ways to craft the ordinance so that it would meet the constitutional tests. And at this point, do we have a draft that accomplishes that, or would the committee need to ask for that to be crafted?
I believe the draft has been given to you as well as the planning board, and honestly, I am unsure at this point what else they would like us to tailor about it, given the fact that there is an outlet for people to have signs up year-round if they would choose.
Correct.
I mean, it avoids that constitutional issue.
Correct.
So And that was kind of, we were sent back to the drawing table at some point, and I don't recall when that was, to adjust some of that. And I sat with Mr. Burkott from the planning department, and we crafted this together a few times, even after we were sent back to say, well, what about, changing some of this? And I believe some of the requested changes came from sitting at the planning department meeting. I believe Councilor Bartley was there for that one as well. And we kind of put in this caveat that, well, what about if you're selling houses over the winter? And I said, all right, so if it's there for more than 2 weeks, we'll give you, just register it. So we know that there was a sign there. And this all comes down to enforcement too. I mean, enforcement has to be done across the board. We can write an ordinance till we're blue in the face, but if they don't enforce it correctly, that's where you run into the issue. So just because it's on the books, which currently our ordinance is in violation of this, it actually doesn't even come to mind right now, the name of the case. Thank you. The Gilbert case, we're in violation of it because we do speak to just political signs and when they can be up, and just real estate signs and when they can be up and taken down. And so there's our violation, but we don't enforce it that way. So that's why it can be there all day long, but as long as we're not enforcing the current unconstitutionality of it. I wish that the planning board had given more recommendations, how they wanted to see it written, rather than denying it, because I'm at a loss here. So I don't.
Well, thank you for summarizing that, because that was my recollection, but I didn't want to speak for you. So thank you. I think we have done a lot of due diligence on this, and so I think we will hear from the member of the public who wishes to address us again.
So I guess my question is just around the term political sign. So is it your hope, Councilor Bartley, that...
You need to speak through the chair when you're
Sorry,
addressing
ma'am.
the committee. Thank you.
Is it the concern is primarily with election signs, which is different than political signs? Someone's election has a time frame. Someone's values, which are indicated by a Blue Lives Matter sign or a Black Lives Matter sign, are not time-bound. But both would fall under the term political.
Crystal?
I want to clarify that this originally came about because Councilor Bartley saw the problem with the temporary signs being political. We've turned this into an across-the-board ordinance so that it's not geared towards political or any other content-based sign, which would be in violation. So I think maybe how this was presented along the way got wrapped up in the fact that it started as a political sign issue, but in reality, it's all temporary signs. As you all know, sometimes we get 6-foot snowbanks in the winter. A, where are you going to put your sign? You're going to dig it out a hole in your snow. And B, that plow is going to take it down the street. You're never going to see it again. So for a few months, bring stuff up to your house, put it on the side of your house instead, I guess. Or if it's really something that is detrimental, I'm not saying we're not lenient. So it's not like, we're going to be out there the day after 2 weeks to yell at you to take your sign down. But I think this got started with maybe an unconstitutional issue, but now this has really been drafted into kind of an all-encompassing, basically the fabrication of the sign rather than the content.
Correct. And the whole goal was to bring our ordinance in compliance with the law.
In terms of enforcement, I think what you might find is that someone who doesn't like someone else's political views, that's who's going to complain. And then it's going to become an issue of my neighbor doesn't like my politics, and so now they're wanting my sign to be enforced. I think you're going to have a really hard time doing this fairly. I also really, is the idea that this would only be about signs that are on the tree belt concerning what you said about snowbanks and plows? Or does this actually apply to me putting it closer to my house or a neighbor putting it closer to their house?
So you're correct.
I don't see many signs on the tree belt.
You're correct. I may have misspoke. This is temporary signs, and there's a definition of them in our ordinance of what a temporary sign is, and basically it's something that one would think of as temporary, so paper or light in weight, or those metal, like foam board signs that get placed outside. And honestly, the complaints may come in, but it's up to our code enforcement team actually going out and doing something about those complaints. But like I said, it's a very short period. I think we have it from November 1 to, I want to say March 1. Thank you. So, I mean, it's a very short time that these people can complain, and they complain all year round, so.
But it does mean that every year, if you want to have a sign in front of your house, you would have the undue burden of going to the city hall and applying for a permit. I also wonder what would happen if someone said no. Then you're going to fine them for having a Black Lives Matter sign in front of their house. I can imagine that going very poorly for the city of Holyoke in terms of perception. Am I correct that there's a mechanism by which if you break the ordinance, there's a fine?
There is, but you're not required to have a permit, you're required to register. So there's no fee, you're simply telling them that your sign is out there, so when your Black Lives Matter sign gets destroyed for whatever reason in the winter months, then we have some way of protecting ourselves if you come to us with a tort claim that a plow took it out. Your other option is to comply with the sign ordinance and create something more permanent, and then you don't have to comply with this at all. So if you have a view that you really want expressed year-round, then just, rather than have a temporary sign that's made probably not to survive the winter, turn it into a permanent sign out in front of your house.
Right. So that's the goal of this ordinance, and thank you for your input. Council Roman?
Yes, Madam Chair, I want to thank my colleague for this, and, I don't want to politicize the matter because I want to make it all encompassing and across the board. As someone who is a Black Lives Matter supporter and probably has that sign myself and seen others with it, it's not about the particular signage, it's exactly that. I happen to have been the last 2 election cycles and my campaign, and some of my supporters have been violators of leaving signs up well past election. And I won't say the member of the body, but a member of the body who called me and said, hey, you have that one sign on this street that's still up, and it's the middle of February, and it's gonna be a blizzard tomorrow. Can you take that sign down? It happens. I think that this is fair, and it makes us within constitutional rights. But I will have to say that, again, as someone on the lower wards who sees even those adopt-a-spot signs for some of these companies that have the most run-down adopt-a-spot signs or spaces that still get to say, we adopted this spot, but it's horrendous, this maybe even motivate them. Go down and fix your belt, or go down and take, and sometimes in the lower wards, they just pop up everywhere. Here's a corner sign, I've seen sign for landscaping in this corner, landscaping in that corner, and they just put them there and just walk away from them. And then, they do become something that's dangerous too. So I applaud my colleagues. I think that this committee has done its due diligence. I would like to make the motion to close the public hearing. Once we're done all speaking, I'll support that. I think that we've done our time. I think that this is great. We have a sign ordinance, temporary sign ordinance that is unconstitutional. I think this corrects it. I too am disappointed in the planning board, just unanimously saying no. I think it would have been great for some feedback, some reflection, some changes. And if they don't have that, then I say we go forward with this. And again, I'm removing the politics of it. I don't think it's fair to pigeonhole this as, well, if you don't believe in this, I'm going to come for you. I mean, if you have it properly registered, then when they come and complain or the police show up, just like I experienced when I was at Community Field showing community movies, and someone showed up and said, we're mad you're showing a movie, I have my loudspeaker permit from the police department. I could easily, and that's what I did. Well, here's my permit. I'm here till 10:30. Have a good night. That's it. That's simple. If you have it registered, here you go. I have my sign. You don't like it? Tough. I got it registered. It's here. It's going to be here longer than 2 weeks in the winter months. And again, I thank the colleague who held me accountable to making sure my political signs were down. I still saw my predecessor signs still up while I was in office the last 3 years. But I think that sometimes it does become excessive, especially in the winter months, and especially where space is tight, and especially down, I can just say in the lower wards, it becomes like a burden. You're right, the snow's piled up, someone's trying to shovel their lawn, someone's walking by, it becomes encumbersome. So I'm going to support my colleague and you all in getting this through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McGiverin?
Thank you. I'll be quick. Not just political signs, but I think, we seem to focus on political signs, and I know this is important because the history, and not just a constitutional issue, but the history tells us what political signs do and what signs don't do. Signs don't vote, first of all. I think most of us know that, and those of us don't use signs, I think feel comfortable in saying that, if we don't use signs, we still have other avenues of looking for and soliciting votes for the elections. The simple history is, there was a time when we had an ordinance that said no political signs. The city of Chicopee had the same ordinance, no political signs. And for 2 or 3 elections, Chicopee and Holyoke looked great in November. There were no political signs. We had debates, we had conferences, we did everything we could to get out and get our message out, and without signs, and it looked a lot nicer. The constitutional challenge came in Chicopee, and then the individual who did it said, "I'm putting up a political sign. It's my right. I dare the city of Chicopee to take it down." Chicopee said, "We can't take it down." And one sign went up, another sign went up. In that election, Chicopee had signs everywhere. The city of Holyoke, the candidates got together at a forum, and we all said to each other, well, we don't need an ordinance to say we weren't going to put up signs. If we all agree, we won't put up signs. And we all agreed. Up until 1 month before the election. I won't tell you a name. I won't tell you that his ancestors came from Greece. But this one individual put up a half a dozen signs. Within 2 weeks, the city had political signs everywhere. True story. There's a song written back a long time ago. I think it was about Mike Sullivan, but it goes, I put my hair up underneath my hat and I went in to ask him why. And if you're familiar with the song, it's very simple. Signs can be pollution. Signs can give messages that are important to people. All signs are important to the person who puts them up. But multiple and multiple and multiple signs don't make for great neighborhoods and don't make for great aesthetic beauty of what the city is about. If we can figure out a way to get around the Constitution, I think we have to try and do that. But at least send a message that, let's get our message out without signs.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, I appreciate everybody's characterization of my ordinance. I'm just going to say that the word political or politician, or my order, is, I read it 10 times. I didn't write political, I didn't write it in there. So the characterization is unbelievable, but it's fear. And what was said by department heads at planning boards, it was to instill fear to the public and to the commissioners who were there. This is what it's really about. This is what he's really doing. Well, that's not what it says, and that's not what Crystal and I wrote and Mr. Burkout wrote. It wasn't anything about politics. Now, I will admit I have had my frustrations with elected officials, and I've said it on the microphone.
Right.
But I didn't write politics or politician, and it's not about content. And I said it numerous times. There's nothing about content.
Correct.
It's just the signs.
Yes.
That's all we're trying to say.
Councilor Roman?
Just one final thought. I want to thank the speaker for elevating our Councilor Bartley to Senator Bartley. I really thought that was the highlight of the public hearing for me, that, we have Senator Bartley with us. So, sorry, just wanted to share that. Was fun.
Would you also like to make a motion?
Motion to close the public
I'm going to
hearing.
second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, Madam Chair, when you feel the time is right, take this up in a month or not the next meeting, 2 weeks, that's ridiculous. But when you feel the time is right, Madam Chair, take this up again.
Okay.
Because we don't have to, we closed the public hearing, so
Public hearing is closed, but,
we have to continue this to it.
no, but what I'd like to say, because I don't want to lose it, is that we should take it up at our first meeting in October.
Okay.
Okay?
Because
So-
we have a time limit, that's after the public.
There are time
The
limits.
time limits, that's right.
But we'll be, once the hearing's closed, we have X days.
The planning board had the time limit. They gave you the recommendation. Now, there is a long time limit for that final decision, but I think you guys are still within, I'd have to calculate, but.
Since we just closed.
Okay, so
Right.
what would be
I think it's
October 9th?
65.
It's either 65 or
days
90.
when we get into the
That was
end.
90 something, but
We always do this, but I don't.
October 9th or next one?
October 9th would be the next reasonable meeting to have it, but if we have a problem with the timeline, Crystal, if you let me know we have a problem with the timeline, I'll move it to the 25th.
Was this, so it says March 20th was the original submission date?
Right, but I don't think, is that when we opened the public hearing?
I mean, you
I
have to
don't
make
thi- I
there's
think
a
that's
decision
what-
decision deadline that I think we
it's-
might already be
That's
past.
a regular city council meeting.
So that would have been when the order was filed, but I'd have to do some research to find out when we opened the public hearing. So if you advise me that we're in danger of the timeline, I'll move it to September 25th. Okay, but otherwise we'll go with October 9th. Okay.
Yep.
On
A motion
to,
table?
So moved. Or
All in
second?
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to take up item number
Second.
6.
all in favor?
Aye.
Item 6, filed by Councilor McGiverin, order that the city council amend the sewer rate ordinance adjusting the deficit in the sewer budget. Now, Crystal, I had originally had this order tabled till the end of June for some reason that I did not note why I did that. And so then I was hoping that we might get a recommendation for a rate from, maybe a specific rate from DPW that then we would set a public hearing around. But I just wanted to refresh everybody on the protocols relative to the rate setting process. Because I think we have to hold a public hearing on it.
Oh, definitely have to hold.
But what I wasn't clear on is whether that's the one notice public hearing procedure. That's all. I just wanted to make sure we're on the.
Mike, do you have any insight into this off the top of your head?
So now that we do have the order in front of us, I guess, Mike, if you would just give us feedback as to a range or a rate so that then we can put out a notice for a public hearing and it won't just be a generic, we're going to talk about the sewer rate. We would have a little more specifics. Yeah. Sure.
How polite, Mike.
We don't bite. Maybe starving.
Thanks, sir.
I was trying to save you from coming down, but I knew it would be a long night.
Mike likes coming down.
Linda, I do have the, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
That's okay.
It's section 9090, it's the sewer use charge city ordinance, and it's done by city ordinance, and yes, it is done at a public hearing, and the Board of Public Works can propose a rate at the public hearing, and then it goes into how the sewer rate would be charged. But it cannot be more than 25%, it can't exceed 25% of the annual budget. Et cetera, but you do need a public hearing, so.
So if we were to advertise the public hearing on the rates, would it be a one-time notice? Because there's 2 other public hearings that we need to hold relative to speed humps and street possible closure. So it would seem to make sense to do those all on the 25th, maybe, if.
That's gonna be a fun meeting.
We'll go 25th for the traffic ones. We have to go October for the rate.
I think it's normal standard public hearing procedure.
2 times, like a zone change? Or one time?
I think it's a one-time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So a one-time notice within X weeks prior to the hearing.
I can clarify with you and Ryan via email just to make
Okay.
sure it's done.
Okay, I just want to make sure we do it correctly. Thank you. All right, thank you, Mike, because this will just give us some background information for when we hold the public hearing. So I really appreciate you coming down. I know we've run through this typical discussion in the past, but it's always a new day.
Right.
So if you can just run over it with us, that would be
Sure.
great.
There's, so as you know, the sewer rate hasn't been adjusted for many years now. And the sewer fund operates structurally at a deficit. where we don't collect enough money to pay all of our bonds and interest, and also the service fee for the wastewater treatment plant.
Is it still over 700,000?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's around that. And that's even if we collected 100% of everything that we build, there still wouldn't be enough money coming in to pay all of our debts. So to get past that, we do need to raise the rate. And there's one other thing with the sewer bill. There's a minimum charge that could either be eliminated or adjusted. So for the minimum charge right now on the sewer bill, there's a $5 minimum payment for anybody who uses 2,566 gallons or less for that quarter. If you use 1 gallon less than that minimum, your bill's $5. But if you use exactly at that minimum, your bill's $13.58 because of the rate that we're at. So the water department, they have a minimum consumption of 10,000 gallons. So one of our recommendations would be to either eliminate the minimum charge completely or raise the minimum to the 10,000 gallons, which would be comparable to the water department. And then there's a table down below where we looked at the total number of counts that we have and how many people would be affected by that change. There's no dollars associated with it. This is just people that will get impacted. And so if you get rid of the $5 minimum, we have just under 8,000 accounts. There's just over 400 people of those accounts are at that $5 minimum. So if you get rid of that, those people would be affected. If
They would pay more at that point?
they would pay more, yeah. If you get rid of the minimum altogether, you would pay for
Just
what
go
you
by
consume.
actual usage?
Yeah, which is in one sense fair. If you went to where there was a minimum of 10,000 gallons, so everything you use up to 10,000, you would be charged as if you used 10,000 gallons. That would affect about a third, a little more than a third of all of the customers are currently below that. So by saying now you're going to have a minimum of 10,000 gallons, there are, more people that would get affected by that.
And that's per quarter?
Per quarter, yes. And then our other recommendation would be to increase the sewer rate from $5.40 per 1,000 gallons, where it is today, to $6.65 per 1,000 gallons, which is $1.25. It's a 23% increase in the rate. That would get us to a point where we're at break even. And then there's the second page has a table. And what this table is the debt service for the sewer account. So there's been a number of CSO-related projects in the past that we're still paying for. If you look at the date of issue, there's a number of them where the date of issue is March of 2017. The projects weren't done in March 2017. It was refinanced in 2017 at better rates. So that's why you have all of those dates the same. But if you look at the sewer long-term debt payments, we're currently this year, we've got $1.5 million of long-term debt that we would have to pay back. Our service contract is approximately $6.7 million. One thing that we haven't done in a long time is maintenance on the sewer system. We're in deferred maintenance, and pretty much the only maintenance we do is when a sewer collapses, and we have to call current in to do an emergency repair. And if we could get into a habit of doing regular maintenance on our sewers, we could extend the life of them. We have alleys that are full of steel plates because there's been collapses underneath, and the fix is just to put a plate over the collapse and continue on to another day. Essex Street, there's usually a collapse once a year where we have to, fix 10 feet of Essex Street at a time, and it's not cost effective. If we could plan sewer rehabilitation through pipelining or other methods, it's a lot cheaper, and there's more bang for your buck, if you will. So pulling this all together, we need about $7.3 million in the sewer fund to pay our bills. We looked at the annual consumption for the last few years, how much is actually going to the treatment plant. It's about 1.1 billion gallons, and when you do the math, you get a rate of $6.65 would pay for that. In 2 years from now, there's going to be a new project that we're planning, the Jackson Street CSO separation project. It has about a $7 million price tag. This is part of the administrative order that the city is under from DEP and EPA. It's not the consent decree, it's an administrative order. We're showing a lot of progress in designing and getting this project that the state and the feds are telling us we have to do. We're meeting their deadlines, and they're starting to work with us a little bit in a sense that we have a consent decree that's in draft format. The consent decree is it's that final legal document that says you will do this under penalty of excessive fines and even jail time if you. One of the things associated with it for you, you guys approve the budgets.
I didn't vote for it.
One of the things with the consent decree is it lays out the timeline for the work and when it has to be done, but there's also a penalty, and it's a fine for violating the Clean Water Act. And it's, for Holyoke, it'll probably be $150,000. And that's just money, that's a check that we write to the feds. And in the last correspondence that we've had with EPA, they essentially said, you guys are doing good in meeting the schedule. We're going to defer finalizing the consent decree. We're going to defer these penalties until we finish what's called the long-term control plan.
But they want to see it keep going.
They want to see it keep going, but also they realize that we don't have $150,000 lying around to just write a check, and it's their way of saying, Holyoke, you're doing what you need to do. Let's keep doing that. So in a couple years, we're going to have the Jackson Street CSO separation project, which is going to be big down in that area. It's a $7 million project, lots of infrastructure. The long-term control plan will be finishing up at that point in time, and that's going to set the schedule for the next project after that, and the next project after that for the next 20 to 50 years. So in a roundabout way, we're still going to be having these large capital expenses that we need to pay for out of the sewer fund. And in order to do that, we're going to need to stay on top of the sewer rate and not provide an increase or a token increase and then wait for another 10 years to look at it again. And then the last sheet, after all that, we looked at the sewer rates of communities in our area, just as a comparison. Because one of the things I always heard from people is that Holyoke pays so much, you're going to raise our rates. But if you look at, this is from the 2017 Massachusetts Sewer Rate Survey that Ty and Bond puts out. They do this every year. They look at every community in Massachusetts, every sewer authority, and they say, what's your rate? So these are, the actual rates for Agawam and Amherst and East Hampton. And you can see that Holyoke's rates are pretty low compared to some of our neighbors like Chicopee. Chicopee's rates are already up near $7 per 1,000 gallons.
They've done more CSO work down there.
They've done
huh?
more CSO work than we have.
Yeah.
But their rate's higher than ours is right
Right.
now. And even at the $1.25 increase, our rate is still kind of in the middle of this Western Massachusetts pack of communities. We'd be right where Springfield is with their rate.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
Westfield's on here, Mike? I don't see it.
Westfield, they didn't report their rate.
Well, I thank you very much for bringing this down, and I really think we'll have to have the rest of the discussion relative to it in public hearing though, right? Counselor Bartley?
I agree. Could I just make a couple points, Madam
Sure,
Chair?
and then Counselor Sullivan.
Oh, Mike, you want to go first? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just
Michael,
a couple of
please.
quick questions, Mike. On page
Small
2,
line on this.
the debt servicing here, the long-term debt schedule, the first one right at the top, date of issue 6/30/2004. Is that like a 20-year bond or 40-year, 30? How much?
I'm not sure how far it goes out.
I know we're just running these out. It looks
I
like,
ran them out
2,
another
3,
5
4.
fiscal years.
Yeah.
This whole schedule, it goes well to the right of the page. It goes until these bonds mature. I can get back to you on that. I don't have when it matures, this one.
Right. I mean, it looks like the rate we're paying is 9% on this bond. Is that possible? Or am I doing some math wrong?
I'm not sure.
They wouldn't have refinanced it when they.
I mean, yeah, that's what I mean. See, some of them say refunding. Does that mean they've been these are restructured ones and?
Correct.
And this one isn't? It just seems the interest we're paying on this is tremendous. Almost way out of whack with the rest.
It does. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure why it's like that, though.
Okay, well, maybe it was a mafia loan.
No such thing as a mafia.
Are you all set?
Yep.
Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, thank you. So, Mike, I just took a few notes on what you mentioned for suggestions, but I just want to just add a perspective on a couple things. One, on the minimum, the $5 minimum, we've discussed that before because we see that in a lot of real estate transactions, and I think you've noted before that other municipalities have a higher minimum number. I'm not so sure if I'd be warm to just making a blanket, everybody 10,000 gallons a quarter, and that's the way it goes, because that could, that could unfairly impact some people. I think I'd be more interested in what's the reasonable minimum fee. I mean, $5 we know is not the right number, but you mentioned a different number to me several months ago, and I've neglected to remember it. But
And I don't remember it off the top of my head either, but from that 2017 sewer rate survey, they also provided minimums for other communities if those communities have a minimum.
I think it was based upon that, and somehow I remember the number 13, but it doesn't matter. I guess I'd be more interested in seeing what that really equates to. and I know Mr. Therrell's here, we're not in a public hearing, but he may or may not have a comment or two, and I've already warned him that there's a 2-minute cap. And then the other one, and I know this is not our favorite subject, I haven't been warm to it in the past, and you didn't bring it up tonight, but I just think it's gonna be brought up again, is that on that side of the hill, there's a debate a few years ago as to whether or not there was a $50 tax or fee. I wasn't particularly warm to that. In fact, I opposed it at the time. But there's a question of what you said is fairness. Now whether or not people are using the enterprise fund is an open question. Whether or not they're using it directly or indirectly is an open question. But I think that has to be, some discussion has to be made, whether it's parenthetically or whatever, as to the residents of West Holyoke, whether or not they be liable for that. Now, I'm not saying I want to do it, but I'm just saying you didn't mention it tonight. You just mentioned a sewer rate for those of us who have to pay it now, a sewer rate increase. But I don't think we should completely forget there was a sewer rate being paid in western part of the city, and that ordinance was changed, and then. So I just want to just say that I think in all fairness, I think we just should lay all our cards on the table. That's it.
And so then I will just use my moment. That was a completely separate issue. It was related to a misbegotten notion about stormwater. And the reality is that the people who do not use the sewer have been subsidizing it for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So that is what doesn't meet the fairness test on an enterprise fund that's supposed to be self-supporting. But the people out there have not complained about doing that for these last 5, 10 years. But they should not be put upon to pay yet again for something that they don't receive in another fashion. They've already been doing that for years. So, but let's just, I think, stay focused on what you've presented us with, because we could get far afield. And we will have to set up a public hearing for this anyway, because we can't address this without holding a noticed public hearing, which we will properly do so that we can do it correctly, all on the public hearing, probably October.
Well, hold on, Dick.
But we have to, before somebody can
Dick, hold on.
speak, the committee has to make a motion to allow.
Yeah,
So, hang on.
Dick, hold on, just hold the line a minute. So, time out for sports. So I'll make a motion to allow the public to speak for up to 2 minutes.
Second.
Suspend rules.
All in favor?
Aye.
Before I do that, Councilor McGiverin?
Thank you. Just quickly too, and I know I want to thank Michael for putting this in a very simple but a very important document that lets us sink our teeth into the severity of the numbers of this problem. And I think, I agree with Councilor Bacon about the enterprise fund, which may have been made a mistake in making the wastewater treatment plant an enterprise fund, because it connects it not just unfairly to the residents of West Holyoke, but unfairly to all of our residents that own property. Because anybody who owns property and pays taxes, I don't think it's the correct way that those tax dollars should be diverted to a deficit that is a truly linked to an unfunded mandate of the federal government. And that's one of the reasons that I've supported some type of a sewer increase, is to correct that just injustice to all of our residents. And I think the time has come that we have to make the tough decision, because those fines are just hanging over our head, not because the federal government are the good guys, because they're just hoping that we put ourselves in the position to correct what they're telling us we have to do. And it'll be a blink of an eye when they say, sorry, but cough off that $500,000, and before you know it, well, I'll stop there. But thank you.
Thank you. So, yes.
2 minutes.
Name and address, please.
Well, famous.
Yeah, she didn't. Yeah, my name's Richard Thero, and I live at 191 Brown Avenue. And the last time we had a meeting here, on May 22nd, was brought up the sewer fund, the sewer rate. And I brought up the point, wait a minute, the sewer rate, that's not the problem. What the problem is the SDO, the storm drain overflows. That's where the big money comes in. Don't forget, we pick everything up. The homeowners pick everything up. We also pay for the water that is used every day by the city that has to be treated. 2 years ago, they were drawing down from the reservoirs 5 million gallons. They were billing for. There's 11 million gallons not accounted for. But we homeowners, we have to pay for have that done, whether it be their schools, public buildings, whatever. Now, we're the only city that does not have a sewer drain overflow rate. Chicopee has it at $100 a year. That's about $25 a quarter, $2 a week. But in Holyoke, that costs us, by not billing them, $70,000 a year. The last 3 years, we lost $210,000. You want to go back for 3 years? You want to go back 9 years? Now, as far as the subsidy that they take from the general fund and pay to the to taxes paid to the sewer rate amounts to 1.5% on your tax bill. If you have a $60 tax bill, that means you pay 1.5%, 90. If you have a $6,000 tax bill, if you have a $4,000 tax bill, you only pay 60. It's very simple. Just take the percentage of the money that's collected, $52 million. Take 10% of that, it's 5.2. We only took out $700,000 last year. So $60,000, you know, that's what it is. How much can you put on the local homeowners here? Now, everybody gets a benefit from the streets. Everybody uses the streets. Yet, we have 10% of the population that don't pay for it. 700 people do not pay. Okay? So isn't it about time that we start sharing the burden a little bit more? Because with the proposals tonight, just keep driving people out of Holyoke. The rents are going to go up. Everything's going to go up. What the big increase? There's something wrong. And that's another thing. When you do a project in a city, isn't it normally, construction isn't normally paid for by all the taxpayers? Not if you're in the 700 club. We paid for everything. We had increases. Mr. McGiverin was one of the founders that brought in Query and the one before that. Yeah. And we had increases of 100%, unreal. And it went up.
Right, and thank you for your comments.
But anyways, now you know where I stand.
Yes, and you will have another bite at the apple at the public hearing if you wish.
Yeah, okay. I thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
the time, and it just kills me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll accept a motion to set up the public hearing,
So moved.
and hopefully for October.
Mm-hmm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you,
Motion to
Mike.
take up item number 7.
Second.
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah.
Motion to suspend the rules, take up item number 9.
Second.
Which Mike?
All in favor? Aye.
Sorry.
So we had tabled item 9, filed by Councilor McGiverin, that the city council look into creating a parking authority. And we had tabled this, and we're supposed to take it up in the summer, I guess, because we were waiting for a report or a committee or something to happen that the mayor was pulling together. And so
How's that coming along? How many times you met? How many times has a ad hoc committee met, Joe?
Alex is your favorite friend, huh?
Well,
Well,
but
I'm just-
seriously though, the machines have
asking
been
the
down
question.
for a year.
We had one meeting.
Okay, I'm just asking a question.
It was,
Oh, yeah. Oh.
it was a month and a half, 2 months ago. But I wouldn't put this on the mayor, I would put it on me and trying to chair the meeting and coordinate and get everybody together in the same room at the same time. We were trying to have, city staff, city council members, and also members from the local businesses that would be affected. And I just did a poor job in coordinating everything, and that's why subsequent meetings haven't happened.
Well,
And don't put it all on Mike, because one of the city councilors missed that meeting, and that's my fault.
so, I guess a while ago I met with our president and the mayor, and part of the discussion did touch on this. And from my perspective, I mean, we have a mayor who's charged with running the city, who is the only one who can enter into contracts, who has the authority to deal with the parking garage issue. And I don't know, it just seems to me like it's getting now put into a committee that is very difficult for people to pull together. And I mean, we're coming up on a year on this now. It's probably in the budget again for how many thousands of dollars, I don't know. But I mean, in your view, I mean, wouldn't you be just as well off just getting with the mayor and fixing the contract?
So the committee was to look at more than just the contract that the city has with executive parking. They're under contract to maintain the on-street parking meters and also manage the monthly subscribers that we have that use the 2 parking garages and other lots around the city. There's other issues with the on-street parking meters where they're older equipment. There's new equipment out there that can take credit cards, that you can use a mobile app to pay for on-street parking. And ours right now just, take quarters, dimes, and nickels.
I thought we were gonna pilot that or something, no?
We did a pilot across the street for several months with some machines that they would take credit cards and mobile apps and display the weather and have the ability for Holyoke MA to run an ad. It was a success.
It was?
It's just how you would navigate a contract with deploying those throughout the city. Where we picked was a good spot for parking. There are other places where parking isn't as in demand, and it would be coming to good terms, favorable terms with a company to make sure that there's good competition out in the market for that type of work. And whether or not we would bundle the on-street parking with management of the parking garage. Because we have,
in terms of...
Yeah, because the people with those meters could also do the same thing in the garages. And we are pulling together an RFP, just an RFP, to go out for those types of parking meters on the street. It doesn't mean that we have to move forward with the RFP, but it would just be, a litmus test, kind of to see what's out there in the market, to see what that would do for the city.
What about the machines in the garages?
So the machine in the Dwight Street garage is only monthlies right now. The coin part doesn't work. And over at the Suffolk Street garage, the top deck has it's for transient parking only, and the lower deck is for monthly parking only.
So are all the people still parking there free on the upper deck?
No.
Oh, that's working?
Yeah, we do have a parking machine out on the deck. It's not the same as the one before. The one before, you would get a ticket, and when you would leave, you'd put the ticket into the machine, and it would tell you how much you owe. This is the type of machine where you prepay for parking.
Okay. You get what you pay for, and
you get what you pay for, and, yeah.
All right. So that's better than we were the last time.
But not perfect.
No, but it's
Because
better.
it's, it's a good trial basis, but the problem is there's only one machine, and it's as you go in. And this morning, if you watched, there could be 6, 7 cars waiting for one person to try to figure out how to pay for what they don't know how to pay for because they don't know how long they're going to be there. There are new machines out there. If you go to any beach, any resort, where you literally can just pay from your phone. You're sitting on the beach. You go, I'm going to stay another hour. You could increase it and just pay as you're sitting there. And that's, the future is what we're trying to get at. It's hard to say, do we need a parking authority if we don't know how much money we can really generate?
Anybody else? Well, thank you very much are you all set, Counselor McGiverin? Okay. Well, thank you very much for this update. We appreciate it, and sorry for the late hour. It's been one of those nights. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, motion for item 7.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Filed by Counselor Sullivan that section 2-470 be amended to coincide with the Community Preservation Committee application schedule as follows. In any given year, the committee shall maintain the following schedule. In March, the committee shall develop and submit its operational and administrative budget to the mayor in accordance with section 2-469C. In April, the committee shall make its final proposal recommendation to the city council in accordance with section 2-468. In July, each designating authority shall appoint members in accordance with section 2-467. The committee shall meet as necessary to fulfill its required duties, except that the committee shall meet no less than 4 times in any fiscal year. This sounds like it came out of the community preservation book?
Right.
Reg?
It's just.
No, but yeah.
Correct, and it's just stuff that didn't get in there on the first
Okay.
go-around. It's kind of a housekeeping
Okay.
thing. The real important one in here, is the, well, they're all important, but
Yeah.
we want to make sure that, the decision is made by July.
The recommendation.
So that
To
things
approve and put
happen
in
with
legal
the
form?
funding thing, right.
Second, if I could, under discussion, Madam Chair.
Council Roman.
I just would like to say what a joy it is to have a city councilor on that committee who's able to expediently bring this back to this body, and so I just wanted
Exactly.
to point out that this is exactly why we have a councilor on the committee, and I thank Councilor Sullivan for his due diligence, and thank you for doing all this work, and I mean, we were a brilliant body to really pass, so thank you.
Don't thank me, thank Crystal.
Thank you for both being here, and those are both battles well, why the heck we have to have city council on this is why.
Okay, so we have a motion, seconded, to put it in legal form and recommend adoption?
Yep.
All in favor? Aye.
That went,
Item number 8.
that went too fast.
Second.
Did we just discuss it?
All in favor? Item 8, filed by Counselor Tallman, and he added my name. Don't ask me why. It's an anonymous person who apparently lives in my ward.
What is this?
Order that pool pumps may not be operated between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. This was filed by Counselor Tallman in response to a request from a constituent that shall not be named. There's an issue in the neighborhood. From my point of view, this comes under the noise ordinance. And if there is to be some correction or remediation done, it would have to come under that. Because we have no ability really to set a time for a particular function of an item.
This is really,
So
this is really
I really,
unbelievable. I'll deny it or at least withdraw whatever you want. I'll make whatever motion you want.
I was just gonna say it comes under the noise ordinance, call it complied with.
Yeah, it does.
I support your motion, Madam Chair.
Courtesy to your neighbor and common sense.
Well, right.
Second, that the order be complied with.
Fine.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion to take up item number 10.
And there is a 10.
Yeah.
Because you asked that we put on the license ordinance.
I did? Okay.
Yes,
Where's
you
that?
asked me kindly at the city council meeting to
Oh,
put it on the next agenda.
that's right. Yes, I do appreciate
Which I
that.
did.
I do.
It was properly noticed on the web.
It was on the
I
website,
can
that's why I read
attest
it.
to that.
Oh.
You wanted to move it because we did all the work.
We did.
It's already done.
So,
I
so
don't know what
motion to,
happened,
motion to
but-
approve.
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Yeah.
So,
Motion to adjourn?
Crystal, as far as I
Second.
know, we're just doing this as cleanup, correct?
Well, something like that. So,
Motion to adjourn with second.
All in favor?
Aye.
yeah,
Thank
okay.
you very much. It was a long night, but.
Dave, I'll send you a text. My stomach is eating itself.
Okay,